I call this regular meeting of the Village of Villa Park Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Let's start with roll call. Calvert.
Here.
Hofstra.
Here.
Jackson. Case. Lutke.
Here.
Orlowski.
Here.
Romano. Schlensky.
Here.
And I too am present. With that, we have quorum. So next order of business would be approval of minutes. That's the minutes of 4/14/2022. Anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second. Any questions or comments on the minutes themselves or the motion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So the minutes are approved. I understand there may be some people here wishing to speak on non-agenda items. Is that the case? So what we're going to do, if there's a motion up here,
I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to move non-agenda items in front of new business.
all right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so for the non-agenda items, you don't need to be sworn in for this, but do please come up to the microphone, name and address for the record. We are being recorded tonight, so we need to speak up. We're being recorded on video, but also by a court reporter. So we need to eliminate crosstalk, no talking from our seats, and let her do her job and let everybody have their moment. And I'll explain the public hearing process when we get to that. On the non-agenda items, just come up, try to keep your time to 3 minutes, and if you've got comments on the same non-agenda topic, don't just come up and repeat what the person ahead of you said. You can just say that you support what they said, and we'll get the point. Whenever you're ready, whoever wants to go first.
And I'm Holly Stamus, and I am here representing the owners of Sturley Funeral Home, 350 South Ardmore Avenue, and they are also going to soon to be residents of 404 Ardmore. My parents, Robert and Elaine Van Staldeinen, Robert and Elaine Van Staldeinen, VANSTAALDUINEN. And I'm here to address the variance request made at last meeting by the developer for the property at 27 West Park Boulevard. I'd like to preface these concerns by making it clear that we are very sympathetic to the needs of new development and updating Ardmore Avenue business corridor, but the plans for development of the property at Princeton Park as proposed would be fairly devastating to the existing businesses and residences who have long invested in the community. First, the variance on parking it has to be rejected. The parking situation on this block is already problematic. The village is aware of these parking issues. The community events planned at the gazebo throughout the year require the spots used at that property and our parking lots. Without those 20 or so spots at 27 West Park, the Park District will need to scale back some of their events. In addition, the 8-unit building that is right behind them only has 7 parking spots, and the 4-unit building next to that only has 6. So the overflow parking of these buildings use that parking lot, usually about 3 to 4 cars. Then the other businesses on Ardmore have residences but no residential parking, have businesses but have no employee parking, and have no customer parking. So it's all, they use our lot. We're happy to do it, but when we have services, we send them to that parking lot. I understand that the parking issues that exist are not the developer's problem, but I strongly urge you to not grant another variance on this block without addressing the current business and residential needs, or considering how even more overflow parking, because there will be overflow parking. They're not going to not have guests. They're not going to not have people over. How that's going to affect our businesses. I also know that they're going to have a visibility variance that they'd like to come to the end. It's already a very difficult block to see. I can't pull out on Highland onto Ardmore during busy times because you cannot see. If there's a car parked in front of the funeral home, and there almost always is, because again, there's not enough parking, I go around to park. If I can't see there, there's so many pedestrians. That is a walking area. It goes to the gazebo. It goes to the prairie path. There's going to be accidents. In closing, I'd just like to say I really desire to see and be part of some positive development in the area, but I would really like to see the village work with the existing businesses and residents to create a vision and the appropriate zoning that will benefit all of us.
Okay, thank you. I would like to comment that we really can't comment on the project because there hasn't been an
I just want you to think
right.
about it before we come to any sort of votes or discussions on what could happen
Yeah.
in the future.
And I understand that. There just hasn't been a formal application yet, and there will be a
Okay.
public hearing
Okay.
if there is. And when that is, the neighbors will be noticed, any neighboring business owners.
Okay.
So I would assume that your property is within that area.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Buchema, and I am legal counsel for the Vinstall family and Sterling Chapel. And I just want to reiterate the concerns that were raised by Mrs. Stamus, and just indicate too that in addition to that, the Sterling Chapel has had a history of providing and accommodating parking because of the fact that it had the ability to overflow onto the 27 West Park property. If that option is no longer available, they will probably need to more closely monitor and protect their use of that parking lot to make sure that they have availability for the family and friends of those who are being laid to rest. So we just wanted to express those concerns at this time.
Okay.
Thank you
for your
very
time.
much.
Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items?
Hi, my name is Anne Marie, and I live in Villa Park, and this is my address for you. Since this is being recorded, I don't have to, and it's going to go on the
Okay.
internet, I don't have to give my personal address into the...
It's not a public hearing.
Right, but it's going on the internet.
Right.
So just like they do at the village board meetings, I have the option to write down my address and submit it.
That's fine.
Okay, so I just wanted to comment quickly on the meeting that I attended last month, where the presentation was given regarding 27 West Park by the new owner slash developer, Craig Ross of Ross Builders. And mostly I just wanted to comment on what I heard. It was a rather lengthy discussion, lengthy meeting, and I heard some thoughtful deliberation by this commission and acknowledgement that MX is a newer code, MXT specifically, with regards to 27 West Park, and that what was laid down on paper may not be fully appropriate for each individual situation that comes down the pipe. When you have a real project in front of you, it may be somewhat, may need some accommodations. And then you talked about the vistas and preserving the prairie path and the assets that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, this building's going up with pretty much no amenities offered, which is kind of uncommon in this market from what I've seen of other apartment developments. I think they're clever to use our prairie path as their amenity. And I think that when we get into talking about the parking, also, I mean, there's some debate on how feasible is the business of having this apartment building, how many people will really want to live there, how walkable is it to various amenities of the town. I mean, there's the Jewel, there's a couple bars, there's a funeral home. But if indeed they don't have as many people with cars as they're predicting, then you're also going to have people who use Uber and Lyft, and they're going to get stuff delivered by Amazon and UPS and Uber Eats. So even though this doesn't meet the requirement for a full traffic study, which my understanding is a projected 100 in and out trips during morning and evening commute times, which is kind of outdated now that nobody goes to work anyway. I think that there's going to be a significant, and I think that needs to be addressed,
Okay.
looked at carefully. So, as I said, I appreciate your thoughtful deliberation last time. I also wanted to point out that one of the slides that was presented was a timeline for the Ardmore Flats planning, and they gave a meeting November 1st with some staff, village staff, November 4th, another communication with staff. December 20th, they closed on the property. They met with village staff January 19th. February 1st, they indicated, this says, they met with Traffic and Safety Commission and presented the site plan, which they supported. So some of us went to the Traffic and Safety Commission meeting last month to learn more about where that claim of support might have generated from, and they pretty much denied that they, supported. I mean, there was no plan. Do you know what I mean? In February, just like what you saw last week wasn't really the full proposal plan. They thanked the guy for coming and, talking to them, but it wasn't, they didn't really support the project.
Right.
So I just want to highlight that.
Okay.
Additionally, in those traffic and safety draft minutes from that February 1st meeting, it says they supported the plan, and it says that the plan was supported by planning and zoning. That's you guys. And we know that you guys never saw it until your last meeting, April 14th. And that was a February 1st meeting.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure there's not something getting out into the ether that, everybody loves this and it's full steam ahead, because in fact, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, that's something we'll need to look into.
Right,
I
right.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Okay, seeing no one else, we'll move to our first item of regular business. Before we do that, though, let me explain how the process is going to work on each of these agenda items. We'll start with staff input, presentation of the petitioner. Following that, we will take public participation and questions. That will work very much like what just happened here. You can come up, have about 3 minutes, state your name and address for the record. Then we'll take questions from the commission, closing comments of the petitioner if they have any, and then we will close the public hearing and move to discussion amongst ourselves and a motion if that's appropriate this evening. So what I'm going to ask is if you expect to speak on either agenda item, either the union project on Villa or the text amendments, which I don't imagine there are any comments on that, but if there are, please rise now. The court reporter will swear you all in at once, and then you could come up at one at a time and then just give your name and address so she has that when you speak. So if you're going to speak tonight, or you even think you're going to speak tonight, please rise now and be sworn in.
Do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in the cause now hearing be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thank you. All right, Ellen, whenever you're ready. First item is petition PZ 220001 for 100 to 110 South Villa Avenue.
Okay, one sec. No, this is the start of a new transcript.
It will, yes, it will be.
Okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Can you just say what you just said again?
Yes.
Turn the machine off and on. Okay, go.
That's fine. It's petition PZ 220001 for 100 to 110 South Villa Avenue, plat of subdivision, zoning map amendment, and special use for a planned unit development, the Union, Catalyst Partners, and Marquette Companies petitioner on behalf of the Village of Villa Park owner.
Good evening. Do you want my name? Yes, my name's Ellen Weber. Okay. Tonight we have before us this case. You have heard a concept plan on March 10th, and this is the formal public hearing. So we've asked the petitioner to go through with good detail as so that it will all be in the record. I'm just going to speak briefly and let them fill in the details on the project. The project is proposed at $50 million mixed-use market rate residential with about 215 to 220 units and 8,000 square feet of commercial space, which will be along Villa with a grand cafe entrance at the path. And this was the zoning request that was published in the newspaper on April 27th. They're asking for a zoning map amendment from the bifurcated zoning that they have of MXR2 and MXT to an MX2 PUD. And it would be a special use for PUD for a 6-story mixed-use building at 73 feet 8 inches, where 4 stories are permitted in the district by right. The garage entry would be on the side yard for public parking and rear yard for resident parking, where the code allows the rear yard entrance by right. The streetscape area would be ranging from 0 to 10 feet, where a minimum of 13 feet is required along street frontages. And I will do a side note, this is one of the elements in the MX district that we've uncovered that we're going to have to look at, the way the minimum street setback is measured for landscaping. The rear yard setback in the code is a 5-foot requirement, and they're requesting 0 feet setback in the rear yard. And they will have some blank wall limitations along the garage walls. They're asking for the reduction of streetscape elements, as I referenced. One of them is that there be no parking on the south side of Wildwood, and this is at the village's request, so that we can accommodate a plan for the tri-path bike path to go through there. And then the driveway entrances into the garage would be a couple feet greater than the 25 feet, which is permitted by code. Additionally, there would be a plat of consolidation to consolidate 3 parcels and a portion of the right-of-way that is Myrtle Avenue, and I have a depiction of that coming up. So since the concept plan was presented in March 10th, since the concept plan was presented on March 10th, this PUD plan does have some significant changes. They were talking about MXT PUD at that time and have since realized MX2 is better because it allows the 0 lot line. And actually both of the parcels to the north and south are MX2 zoning, so it's an appropriate request. The building height was decreased from the 84 feet to 73. And I had an error in my memo. The diagrams often put an extra 100 in front, and I copied that into the memo. It's proposed at 73 feet 8 inches. And the reason for that is they were able to put 1 level of parking underground. They have added the street trees to Villa and to Wildwood. We're still going to be talking to them about streetscape furniture and that kind of element. That'll be a discussion as we move forward. And then they've added an additional pedestrian entrance to the garage, and they've made the entrance a little more prominent with canopies over the entrance as the code requests. Here's the zoning so you can get a feel for it. This is Villa here, and so here's the parcel, and you can see it was 2 different districts, and it is MX2 to the north in the purple and MX2 to the south in the purple. So that would take this whole red purple as a blend in the neighborhood. I referenced the triangle. This is what would be vacated. The street itself, it comes along like this, and it made that little triangle, and then it went north again. So it would carve that off to square off the parcel. One of the benefits of the plan is currently the former mulch site encroaches 10 feet onto the path, and this is their actual lot line. And so they're going to remove that encroachment with they'll set the path back where it should be, expand the path. There have been several public input opportunities already, and we have had inquiries. There was a voluntary community meeting they held at the rec center on February 24th. They did hold the presentation of the concept plan here on March 10th. Then legal notice was published and the letters were mailed on April 27th. And then here we are this evening, assuming there's a desire to go forward, we'll see this at a village board in the future, and that date is still to be determined. There is public benefit for this PUD. It's high-quality design. There's a substantial amount of brick, up to 40% on one of the facades. The current plan shows 102 public parking spaces, so that'll move around a little bit as they would finalize their architecture. There's a reduction in impervious lot coverage. There was a memo in your packet detailing that, and Vasily is with us here this evening and can speak on any questions we have on stormwater. They will participate in the tri-trail construction, and of course the project would bring increased sales tax, increased housing options, new residents to patronize our businesses, and they will restore that portion of the path. So at this point, I'm not going to get into the details. I'm going to turn it over to the petitioner, if that's all right.
Yes, that's fine. And for the petitioner, I would just remind you, this is the first official public hearing. So while we are interested in what's changed since you were here last, kind of a broad overview of the whole project, because it will be on the record, and there are people here who probably are hearing about the project for the first time. So.
I thought we were going to use the slides before happening. Oh, okay. I'm David Lyon. I'm with Catalyst Partners, based in Milwaukee, at 833 East Michigan Street. I'm sorry, Suite 10,000. And we have here in the audience our partner, a representative of our partner, Ann Reckelhoff, who's with Marquette Partners, who's based in Naperville, Illinois. What we presented to you at the last public hearing for, I guess we would call it a non-voting presentation for comment only, was a 7-story building. So a little bit different in terms of massing and height, which our architect will go through with you, as well as our engineer. But the concept we brought forward was really at a high level, an aesthetic that was really reached back into the history of Villa Park to try to pull forward and pull through the aesthetic and architecture, a nod to the history of the 2 rail lines that served not only Villa Park at the Ovaltine factory, but into Chicago. And at present, as you know, they're now the Great Western Trail. Right at the trailhead it would be the main corner or a main entrance to our building, at least the commercial space, as well as the Prairie Path, obviously, as part of that history. So hence the name Union and some of the branding and imagery that you'll see today of the building is from that history. And so we're, again, trying to pay homage to that in what we do here. Additionally, there'll be 8,000 square feet of commercial space. We hope to have a tenant. It might be a range from a restaurant to maybe a food hall concept, where it could be anchored by one major tenant, but have other opportunities for dining, etc., to serve not only the residents, but people working during the business hours, but also people using the trails for recreation, as well as the events. Villa Park's known for having some wonderful events in Cortese Park, and we feel because of the location of this building to that park, we want to do something special that commercial space could serve that audience for that programming as well. So with that, I guess I would just add also that really the start of this project included a discussion of the public purpose, which to a large degree is the 100 spaces of public parking that we've integrated into this building. We know because of the wonderful things happening here, there's a shortage of public parking. And as we've said before, and what you'll see again today, in addition to sufficient reserved parking for the residents, we're going to be providing 100 spaces of public parking that will be owned by the city. And from what we know today, it'll be offered for free. So with that, I'll turn it over to, would it be our engineer or you?
We're going to turn it over to Ryan.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce Ryan Wagner of V3 Engineering.
Thank you, David. Good evening, Commission. Before you is our final plat of subdivision. This is truly a lot
Before you
consolidation.
get too deep, could you just state your
Oh,
name
yes, sorry.
and address so she has that?
Ryan Wagner with V3 Companies. 7325 Janes Avenue, Woodridge, Illinois.
Thank you.
So it's a consolidation of parcels. Ellen went through the triangular piece at the corner of Myrtle that will be consolidated into Lot 1. And I guess the real highlight I mean, there's not much to go into on a plat, but the south side of that lot line is where that 10 to 12 foot encroachment used to exist and is now turned back over and re-landscaped for the Western Trail. This is our PUD site plan. This document highlights the site area is 1.95 acres. Building area is roughly covering 95 to 96% of that. Shown on this is a new green space area of 772 square feet. That's within the property line only, and the reality is there's planned for at least 2,000 square feet of green roof. So that net new green area within the property line is likely going to be in the ballpark of 2,700 square feet of net new green space within the site boundary itself. Overall, with the modification to the south side exterior to our lot line, turning that back over and making that green space, overall the project will result in a net new pervious area of just over 10,000 square feet. The landscape plan here is showing that 10 to 12 foot strip buffer on the south side as being returned and sodded. There's notes on there. Street trees have been added on the east side along Villa. We'll look to mirror the trees on the opposite side of Villa as far as location, and we'll work with staff on species type as we continue through design. I'll turn it over to Jason with architecture.
Hi, good evening. It's Jason Corbin Associates. 648 North Plankinton, Plankinton Avenue, Suite 240, Milwaukee, 53203. Good evening. So we came before this body in March with a 7-story building, 215 proposed dwelling units, and about 425 parking spaces. As David mentioned, approximately 100 dedicated to the village as public parking. At that time, we did not show this body these floor plans, but we wanted to give you a better sense of how the building is laid out. So the retail that David referenced is in the lower right, facing onto a south-facing plaza that overlooks the Great Western Trail. The main building lobby is on the northeast corner in light blue, and other building services and amenities are on that corner. Immediately to the east of there, or to the west of there, I'm sorry, is the public parking. Right now, as drawn, it's 102 spaces. As always happens, we expect to lose one or two. As soon as the engineers get their hands on it, they'll take some of our space, as always happens. We think we've provided enough, but it's never enough. So the yellow is public parking accessed off of Wildwood, and we've always had a pedestrian access point, which you can sort of see in a small arrow off of Wildwood. Per the comments from this group in March, we did also add a pedestrian access point to the south-facing plaza, so that someone hoping to use the plaza or the retail does not have to walk all the way around the building. Further to the west, there is the beginnings of our private residential parking. So this will be an open air structure. The public and the private parking will be separated by some sort of barrier so that the private parking remains private. With staff input, we've added access points for fire departments so they can get from one section to the other. That is noted here. And the secondary lobby is on the corner of Myrtle and Wildwood, which includes a secondary elevator. The building is too long to have all the elevators really in one place, so we have a secondary elevator core in the northwest corner, and we have a ramp coming in off of Myrtle. When we showed you this building in March, that ramp went up. For a number of reasons, we determined that it would be a better project if that ramp went down into a basement. So we can talk a little bit about that. So right now, the only unshaded area in this drawing is a ramp that, again, used to go up and now goes down. So a little bit backwards, but we're going down. So here we are in the basement, and the basement is exclusively residential parking with mechanical space. And so this used to be the second floor of the building in the version that you saw in March, and now it is a basement. Part of the reason we did that was the only real public comments that we got that were negative, and I think negative, even negative is a strong word, but there were concerns about the height of the building. And so we heard that. We looked at ways to reduce the height of the building, and that's when we made the switch from a podium to a basement. It delivers the development team a lot of other benefits from a constructability and cost standpoint on top of producing a building that's more in scale with the village. So we think that's a win-win. So what we're seeing here is the first floor of residential. So this is now the second floor of the building. So we see our green roof. Final design is to be determined. So we have two areas of courtyard that are outdoor amenities facing south, overlooking the trail. The plan still is to, in the western courtyard, to have a swimming pool that immediately overlooks the Great Western Trail. Blue areas are building amenities, so things that you would expect in a Class A residential building, party rooms, fitness rooms, et cetera. The final amenities are to be determined. The market for apartment amenities is changing almost daily. And then the units are basically color-coded. The mix and size of units were given to us at the end of a detailed market study that was performed for this project. So a nationally known market analyst gave us this mix to try to fit onto the site. Here's your typical floor of residences. We had 5 floors in March, we still do. The one real change to this floor plan from the plan that you saw in March is that we did add 5 units to the building, and I can tell you exactly where they are. The area where there is a notch and the corridor is exposed to the south, that was entirely exposed on both sides in the plan we showed you in March. And for a number of reasons, we found it advisable we keep the notch that we described to this body in March, but put a stack of units there. So basically that bridge, if you will, was proving to be cost prohibitive. And so to make it less so, we did add 5 units to the building. So as Ellen mentioned, we have proposed an increase from 215 units to 220. And the final counts will be determined, as I mentioned, in parking, but one of the benefits of moving the entirely private level of parking from a podium to a basement is that we are no longer hitting the height limits as prescribed by the building code. It changes the way that we build the building. At least it changes the way we build the parking, and it's more efficient. So we're picking up parking spaces in the residential parts of the building, and it's commensurate with the addition of units in this building. I won't dwell on these elevations too long because they lie, but well, elevations lie. You'll never see the building like this. But you can see the parking area is now removed and dashed in below grade. Our ground floor retail maintains the same height that it had in March. The area that is sort of our pavilion facing the trail does get a little shorter because we had been running it up adjacent to the second floor parking. It's still 1.5 floors tall. It's still 20 feet tall, and we'll see that in a moment. And as Ellen mentioned, the outboard facades of our street elevations are almost entirely brick. So anything you see that's a dark material that's not brick is either recessed or it's on the 6th floor. It's 70 feet away from where anyone can see it. The courtyard elevations are, again, set back. They are that darker material. And again, any sort of facades that are outboard or at or near the property line are predominantly masonry. So we're seeing the facade that faces the Great Western Trail here, and the facade that faces Myrtle. And you can see on that Myrtle facade, we have overhead doors for the residential parking. We'll go back for 1 second. Ellen did mention that we did increase and sort of start to elaborate on the pedestrian entrances to the public parking. We're adding lighting, we're adding awnings, just making them a little more prominent. And we did that on the south side of the building as well, which are the labels to the lower right on the long elevation. So that is a pedestrian entrance from the public parking onto the outdoor plaza. So here's our new view. Here's our new view looking southwest from Villa Avenue. So again, the retail is largely unchanged. The residential components of the building is largely unchanged, again, with the exception of adding that stack of units. We still see the large gap about 40% of the way down the facade. So adding that stack of units did not remove that gap. We did that by design. Here is our aerial overview showing a building, as Ellen mentioned, which is now a little over 73 feet tall. The one that we brought before you in March was at the absolute edge of what the building code permits, and we had to do a lot of things to get it to comply, and those things were not nice, and so we fixed them, basically. So we're seeing this from a distance, and we have Ovaltine in this drawing just for scale. And as David mentioned, you know, just trying to get the buildings to talk to each other a little bit, not mimicking something that was built 120 years ago, but at least having a bit of a dialogue. And then here is our retail with the pavilion overlooking the trailhead. So again, we've maintained our outdoor plaza. We did go back and forth after our meeting in March about what we should do for whether we were going to do planter boxes or other street trees or what we should do on Villa Avenue. And after internal review, what we found is that basically the sidewalk's not wide enough to comfortably accommodate pedestrian traffic, planters, and car doors swinging over the curb. So we elected as a team to say, well, we'll just use the village standard grates and add street trees. So we've added the street trees on Villa as well as on Wildwood, but those are more in a greenway. And then this is our closing slide. So this is just a kind of a direct comparison of what we brought before this body in March on the right. So that was our 7-story proposal, where the second floor was entirely parking. And so we were spending a lot of effort and money to try to dress that parking up and make it look integrated into the building. Ultimately, we determined as one of the reasons we changed it, it was not the highest and best use of funds to try to skin that parking architecturally. And then we see on the left, this is the design that's brought before you tonight. So fundamentally minor changes with the exception of the parking. And that is what we have for our presentation tonight. I'm sorry, also, we do have material samples here that we can bring up if anyone is interested in seeing them.
Yeah, if you just want to actually maybe tell us what they are as you set them up here, and then we could just pass them down and look at them.
So on our base, this is minimal, but we have a darker masonry base, and this is at the windowsills. These are kind of stacked in here out of order. Bear with me for 1 second. This is our proposed face brick. So again, I think that matches the renderings pretty nicely. We have clear glass. I mean, I don't know that you need to see it. It's clear glass with a low E coating on it. It's as clear as we can make it and still pass energy code. These are window frames. So a chocolate colored window frame, other metal elements on the building, copings, flashings, etc. And this would be a fiber cement board product, which is sort of the dark material you see in these drawings at the top of the building. This is, can you go back one slide?
Oh, that's the wrong way.
There you go. This is a soffit material you see underneath that overhang. So it's a non-combustible product, but it's got a nice wood look to it. We've had great success with this product. And frankly, you know, it is 15 feet in the air. You know, no one will really know that it's not actual wood, but it's very easy to make.
I'm having a really hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry.
And frankly, what?
It's very difficult at the distance that this is above the sidewalk to determine that it's not actual wood, but it is easily maintainable and non-combustible. That's why we like it. And then the final piece of the puzzle, and this is not terribly representative, but at the parking, and I'm actually going to go back to the elevations, what we are showing right now, primarily on Wildwood, the areas that you see in gray on the ground floor, that is open air parking, right? So it's not mechanically ventilated. So those openings have to maintain a certain level of opening. And what we're proposing is maybe using different scales of perforated metal scrim to kind of visually screen them. That's not a great sample, but, and then part of what we're doing is, you know, trying to make sure that at some point, maybe across Wildwood is not the back of house of some retail buildings, that we are at least partially hiding headlights from cars from shining across the street. So between a knee wall and this screening material, we hope to achieve that. And also it just tries to make the parking structure look a little less like a parking structure, but actually have some architecture to it. So those are the samples we have here tonight.
All right, thank you. So we will move to public participation and questions. So the way we will do this is if you have about 3 minutes, state your name and address for the record. And then if you have any specific questions, please direct them towards me and not the applicant, and then the applicant can answer them all together at the end. If they choose, and some of them will probably be similar questions to what we have. So whenever, I assume there's somebody here who wants to speak? Yeah, good. Name and address for the record, please.
Richard Mental, 118 South Myrtle, and I'm here representing the Kenilworth Park Townhome Association, the Homeowners Association. Really, a simple question is window treatments, whether there's going to be a standardization or if the units are supplied or rented out with window treatments, because with that much glass, there's always a concern of all the different features you end up with in the windows and different colors of blinds and different types of blinds and things, and that can really start to detract from that elevation view we all get to see when you're wondering what this is going to look like. Because this is my new view out of my front window a little bit to the east, so
Okay.
I live along the Great Western Trail. My unit faces the Great Western. I'm in the middle of the Kenilworth development.
You've got a nice unit.
Yeah, it's nice now, you know, so it's certainly the newer units that were built are going to have a little more concern because they're closer to it, but that was really my, you know, I was more worried about the elevation views and things because the descriptions we had really weren't, you know, they weren't that meaningful till you see it like this, so.
Okay.
But I'd say right now glass, you know, just what they planned there, because I know the low E glass does reflect some, but you know, it still can create some undesirable effects.
Okay. Thank you. We'll
Thank
ask
you.
that.
Spell your last name.
Mental. Thanks.
All right. Anyone else wishing to questions or comments?
Good evening.
Good
Cheryl
evening.
Tucker, 434 South Cornell. And I'm not even sure that what I'm bringing forward is something that this board would handle, or if it's something Public Works would be handling on building permits. But I am bringing it up because with all the new development going on in the area, with Kenilworth townhouses, the recreation center, and this development and the depletion of the green space, I didn't see in any of their plans anything about the additional wear and tear, or should I say strain, on our sewers and water system, or the piping for this building that's going to be connected in the village to it, with the additional, and you guys know better, I'm just trying to state what I'm trying to say, with the additional 220 units and the swimming pool. I'm not sure if we have an ordinance on the books that requires them to do the right depth or piping or whatever to connect to our sewer systems, so that the residents on Wildwood and Monterey won't be affected by the sewer backup or the flow going on their direction, because they've already have big enough issues with storm water problems when it floods and we have some raining. I would hate for them to have an additional problem if the pipes are flowing that way for those houses down there. So I'm not sure if we have an ordinance stating to address that problem. And I'm not sure with the additional strain on the sewer system in that area, if it's going to affect the people in the Ovaltine Court townhouses, which the same flow goes that direction, if I'm understanding correctly the piping goes under their system for sewers. Prairie Garden and the other business districts in that area, because I didn't get a layout of the sewers and the piping to tell for sure if this will affect that and how great of a difference it's going to make. But I just wanted to point it out because some of the residents are a little concerned that they might end up with backup, adding more units to the sewer system. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi,
Hello.
Vicki Flaskamp, Flaskamp, 421 South Oakland, Villa Park. Oakland, one word. Cool. So one thing, I love the new design. Thanks so much for lowering the height. I think that was a very large concern for many other residents who live around there, for which I am one of them. Does lead me to still a little bit of concerns that we still need to look at. They mentioned the housing options. What housing options are they bringing? We already have a luxury apartment building going up on the north side. We have another possible project on Park Avenue. We have a lot of apartments in the neighborhood. How many 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments do we need in Villa Park? So I'd like to understand a little bit more about that on the variety. Also like to understand their research that they've come up with and who the tenants can be, as far as like either restaurants or clothing stores or cafes or whatnot. Like to understand a little bit more about that, because I don't want to see any empty storefronts, because we already have some empty storefronts on Villa. Would like to really kind of see those go away. They mentioned that, it's right by the Great Western Trail. Are they going to be providing any bike racks? We have a lot of people who come down the Prairie Path and the Great Western Trail for the establishments already around there. There's not enough bike parking as it is. We see bikes parked everywhere, so we need to understand how that could be accommodated. We talk about the 100 parking spaces for the village. The one thing is right now it's free. Would really like to understand how this can stay free, because I think that's a concern for the village that eventually we're going to have to pay for them. So going down there, because just going to the storefronts and whatnot, how much do we need to pay? Because there are some places where we do in surrounding towns. They talk about the parking facilities. I know he mentioned that, right now there may be some parking added, decreased or whatever, but they also added an additional 5 apartments. So how many parking spaces do they need to have per apartment? How many bedrooms are there? Each and every bedroom in that apartment building can have a car. Where are those cars going to go? Need to understand that. And that was all I had. I love the materials, just to let you know. Sorry, I think that's a great one. It looks very nice. I appreciate the thought that they put into it. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? All right. I'm not seeing anyone else. So,
I have one thing. I was going to ask if they do a traffic study with the rec center. Go ahead.
okay. Oh, thanks.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I guess I would ask the applicant, are there any of those questions you want to address immediately? That, if you would like.
Regarding Mrs. Tucker's questions regarding sewer connections, there are certainly requirements for making proper connections at the appropriate depths, and we are working closely with staff and have made final engineering submittals at this time. So we are working through staff comments to ensure that we are connecting to the appropriate sewers and distributing flows appropriately. And one other item in my purview, traffic study-wise, we have done a traffic study that has been submitted. It did account for the rec center, but we have been working with staff because now there is the rec center has a known square footage, and we were below that because when we did our traffic study, we didn't have design documents, so we are in the process of updating our traffic study.
Is that
Are we after are we at it?
She asked
It,
if it was.
it was done after the worst of COVID, and there is still a COVID percentage added back to the traffic. We are still adding a percentage of additional traffic to our counts based on a COVID adjustment factor.
Ann Reckelhoff, Marquette Companies.
I'm sorry, what?
Ann Reckelhoff, Reckelhoff, Marquette Companies, 135 Water Street, floor 4, Naperville, Illinois. I can address the aesthetics question about the window treatments. Of course, that we would provide those. They would be part of the design. They would tie nicely into not only the interior side of the units, but also the exterior as well, and would match the exterior elements. So those would be provided with the units.
David Lyon, again, with Catalyst Partners. Let me try to address a series of questions. I hope I got them all. The first was, how do we determine the quantity and the variety of units that we'll be providing here? So our architect earlier in this meeting referenced a nationally respected market research firm. So we rely heavily on them to look at the existing market, what's being provided, what there's a shortage of, and give us guidance on, one, the number of units, but then the proper unit mix, each type, anywhere from studios to what they're calling junior 1-bedrooms now, to 1-bedrooms, 2s, and 3s. So it's based on real market data, competition in the marketplace, existing buildings, and buildings that are known to be coming onto the marketplace. So we use a third party to validate that, and they work interactively with our whole design team. So it's not just give us a report and we'll design to it, but this company has been involved with this whole team for a number of months now. With respect to the potential tenants of the commercial, similarly, it's based on market research and what is lacking in the marketplace and what might be successful here. But beyond that, we are in dialogue with a local broker to discuss not only potential tenants there, they're not formally engaged, but we are in discussions about the range of tenants we should be seeking. And there's indication that the space will be a really good location for a viable tenant. But we're also using the same broker to try to find a new home for the existing tenant of the building that the village leases and will need to be raised for this project. And so it's an ongoing process, but I wanted to take this opportunity to let you know we're working with the village to try to find a new home that's suitable to that existing tenant. I think the next question that was posed was with respect to bike racks for the public. So obviously we view the Great Western Trail as a great amenity, recreation-based location. So internal to the building, we're offering a bike storage room, which Jason showed you, which was on the northwest corner of the building with easy access onto Great Western Trail. Certainly we're going to offer bike racks externally for our own residents, but we have no problem in our landscape plan figuring out locations for bike racks for public use, because we really want to make this a place that people using that trail are going to want to stop and take advantage of. I can't answer the question about public parking and maintaining the fact that it's going to be offered for free. I will say that we're offering the parking to the village, and all indications so far is that it's going to be offered as it is now in that location for free. Ryan answered her question about the traffic study, and then the only other question remaining on the list was the Cardo apartment ratio. And I'm going to look to Jason. Thank you, Jason, for that, to make sure we get exact numbers. So, thanks.
So as I mentioned earlier, so right now we have about 315 bedrooms in this development, and the residential parking is sitting right at about 315. So we are at 1 per bedroom, which actually in a lot of places is now considered excessive, but we felt to be safe that we would do it here. And furthermore, as I mentioned, it's not 100% finalized, but when we were able, frankly, to change the way that the parking is being built, we're picking up spaces. And so I won't guarantee it, but I'm pretty confident we're going to pick up at least 5 spaces. And the 5 units that we're adding are 1-bedroom units. So we are very comfortable with the parking ratio. And frankly, the developers have to be, because under parking a building of this size is economic death. So they have to do it. So that's where we are with parking.
Okay. That's all the questions I had written down. So that's good. So, all right, so any questions from the commissioners at this time for the applicant?
I have one, Jason.
Yeah.
You said there were going to be 300 or 220 units. What is the mix of studio, 1-bedroom, 2 bedrooms?
We have it on these documents, and I really doubt it's going to be difficult to read. You do it.
I don't remember seeing it either.
Is that the slide that it's on, or is it, was that Ryan's slide? Yeah.
Keep those.
I'll find it. Whoops. Wrong way, it's right. Thought you had
Yeah,
it
you have it. It's
right there. Okay. So let me try to do
Go
this.
to the, well,
And then I just need to slide it over. That's per floor, right?
well, this floor is a little different because it has the amenities, so,
I thought we had one that captured the whole.
what we do, it's on the next slide.
Oh, got it.
But this is a good representation of the blend of apartment types. So in this particular floor plan, we have 40 units. It tends to look like a barbell, or a bell curve rather, right? So we have only 1 studio per floor. But then you see the A2, C1, C2, those are all different sizes of 1-bedrooms. As David mentioned, the A2 is what's called a junior 1-bedroom, which is an industry slang for saying it's a 1-bedroom that's probably less than 600 square feet, which are incredibly popular. The D is a 1-bedroom plus den. So in the age of COVID and post-COVID, those are also extremely popular because they offer a work from home opportunity. And then we see a mix of, out of 40, 9 of them are various sizes of 2-bedrooms. And then at the other end of the bell curve, we have 6 3-bedroom units per floor. So
6 3-bedrooms?
on this particular floor, that's correct.
No, I think it's 13 2-bedroom, 2 3-bedroom.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're correct. It is only 2 3-bedrooms per floor. Sorry, I misread it. My eyes are going. So yeah, it is 13 2-bedrooms in this stack versus 2 3-bedrooms. So it's weighted heavily towards 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms of various sizes.
You were accurate with the bell curve analogy.
Does that answer your question?
It did.
All right. Any other questions?
I see on the 102, on the parking plan, there's a big square that's labeled there as trash.
Yes.
Is that where the garbage pickup is gonna happen from too, in that parking lot, or where do they access this from outside the building?
So the building, if you see right there, in the area in the upper left that is labeled storage, you see a little carve out in that room. That is a trash room. So we have a trash and a recycling chute proposed.
Okay.
So they go down to an enclosed trash room at grade. And the way these buildings typically operate, the bins are rolled out and put into trucks on the street. And that will, in a building this size, that will likely happen once a day. And my
It would
assumption.
have some sort of compactor
Yeah.
in there with that separate out recycling trash, and then, yeah, the service team would roll it out the day of pickup and pull it right back in.
So they would be picking that up on Wildwood? that your anticipation?
Can you go back to?
There's a trash enclosure in the middle of the
Public
parking area.
Correct.
Is that to serve the building, or is that, I mean, the residential, or is that to serve the?
That's what you're referring to.
That's
Commercial
serving the
uses.
residential.
Okay, that's for the residential use as well. Okay.
And the trash and recycling needs of the retail could vary wildly depending on the user. Obviously, a restaurant produces vastly more refuse than a retail store. That trash room is basically 30 feet by 20 feet. It's pretty large. And so the thinking is probably that the retail tenants would just walk their trash over there and store it in that room as well.
Mike, you sounded like you had a question.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. One question that I have with the parking going underground, so I'm assuming you're gonna have some kind of drainage for the parking areas in the basement. Where's the water from any of that gonna go?
I can speak.
Oh, okay.
Can you zoom it back out?
That'll be one part of my question.
Okay. Too much, or is there?
Can you go to the next slide? So in any of this parking, this is perfect, David. That's
Okay.
perfect. In any of this parking, either the parking at grade or what was second floor or now basement, because they are open air, water can get into them. All of these concrete slabs would be pitched to floor drains, and it's connected and it's drained just like you'd drain a roof. And so there's a dedicated drainage system to drain the parking levels, both at grade and now below grade. And those drains would have existed if that parking was on the second floor, so because you have to get the water out. So nothing has changed from a parking drainage standpoint with this change.
Okay, and seeing that we have some village staff here, maybe they can help answer some of this question. One of the concerns that I do have is stormwater in that area. No matter, I would guess you'd say, no matter where you're at in that whole vicinity, we have issues with water and where it goes. So with a building of that size, it's going to probably accumulate more water than just flat surface, as far as ground surface. And then my concern would be where I understand we'll be pumping that water or putting that water into a drainage system somewhere, and where that drainage system would connect. Is that going to connect to our stormwater system in that area?
You want?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think we have an engineer from the village, so.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And I think it might clear up some of the other, some of the concerns and comments from some of the local businesses that are not present tonight.
Vasily Voskresensky, I'm with the village
I
board.
can't hear you.
Vasily Voskresensky.
Can you spell it?
I'll give you the card.
Okay. A lot louder, please.
Okay.
Maybe use the mic.
Yeah, so they are proposing two connections to the direct connections to the storm sewer on Villa Avenue. And like Ryan said before, they are currently the site is almost 100% impervious, and they are reducing the impervious area. So the stormwater is not an issue. They are not obligated to provide any stormwater detention per the DuPage County ordinance. They are required to provide some by the Village of Villa Park ordinance, and they will be addressing it via the fee in lieu of.
Okay, and then I guess the current issues that we have actually on the opposite side of the Great Western Trail that I've actually brought up is the village have any idea on how we can fix that problem in case this project brings more issues to that area?
Well, as it stands right now, they are not going to bring more issues. They're reducing the impervious area, at least in theory, they are improving the situation and reducing the stormwater runoff. And we looked into the issue you brought up. That's a stormwater capacity issue. It's just the storm sewer is undersized. It cannot handle the flow.
Okay.
In that particular area on
On the other
Cortez.
side of the
Yeah.
on the other side of the Great Western.
Yep.
Okay.
Anybody have additional questions for Vasily while he's up there?
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that. Are those areas on Cortese across the path, and these interconnected, or are they only connected once they get to Villa?
So that
Not even.
particular corner, which is on the west side of Pioneer Feed, that storm sewer outlets into the Kenilworth storm sewer, which ultimately is tributary to the storm sewer on Villa Avenue. So the storm sewer on Villa is sized to a 10-year storm, I believe, and everything west on Kenilworth is probably 2 to 3 year storm.
Okay.
So ultimately, that area is connected to the same storm sewer, but this connection would be downstream from Pioneer
From
Feed.
Pioneer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Topographically, water that falls on this site won't drain.
Isn't going that way, yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, and I noticed just from looking at the topographic maps that the back corner of the Pioneer parking lot where it meets the roads around Cortese there is the low point in the
It is.
Villa Avenue area. It's, pretty much all the roads, everything west of Villa between like Wildwood on the north and Park on the south, I guess Central on the south, heads that way.
Yep.
You know that from seeing where the water from Jewel goes. So, so it's, yeah.
All goes downstream.
Okay. Any other questions for Vasily, anyone? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. All right. Any other questions for the applicant?
Got a couple. So I too shared the concerns over the stormwater, but it sounds like topographically that may be remediated or self-mitigated. With regards to the parking concerns, few concerns on that. So during the construction period, especially during summer events such as Beer Fest that would happen, I believe, right on Cortese, or Myrtle and Cortese, what is the proposed parking plan? What is the proposed public parking plan during construction time when the public parking will be eviscerated because of the construction? Does the village have a plan? That might be more of a village question than anything, but what is our plan for that?
I don't know, I know it's a village issue, but I just wanted to talk about timing and construction. Yeah, because what we've talked about so far is that we would start construction post the peak period and post completion of the programming that occurs in Cortese. But with respect to the actual plan and staging, that's something we have yet to work out with the village. We need to complete our general contractor selection and incorporate them into that planning process.
Yeah, just to, on that concern, I'm sure you're aware, this project in the rec center will be, there's no doubt based on the timelines that you will be overlapping. So, we just ask that, Ellen, you look like you might have something to say, but I would just hope that we work together and find a solution, and if that involves us up here brainstorming along with you guys, or if it's all with staff, that's fine as well. But that is going to be a problem for probably at least 18 months.
Ellen Weber, I would say the Senior staff has talked about this. We're cognizant of it, that there could potentially be 3 construction projects overlapping each other. And it's common to create a landing page online so that people are aware, to do an e-newsletter just so at the beginning of the week, so people are aware of what's going to happen that week, if there'll be any closures. Similar to what you would do when you have a major streetscape project in a downtown. There's a lot of common techniques that other communities have used to educate so that people know what to expect. Signage, communications. It will be a disruption, of course, but if things happen at the same time, it might actually even be less of a disruption, and that no one will be going to Lions Park while this will be happening. I have spoken to several of the businesses who are very concerned about the events, and I can't tell you we have a plan created, but it's something that we've talked about.
Oh,
You know, the concerts, et cetera, could be, cause some consternation.
That's fair. I'm personally less concerned about whether people are going to visit Lions Park than are people going to be deterred from visiting our commercial businesses.
The downtown area is pretty unforgiving in terms of where else can you place parking. At that meeting, we sat and we looked at all the right-of-ways. Can we squeeze more in here? Can we angle them here? It gets to be a capital improvement project and a budget question for the long-range future of the downtown.
That may be the perfect caveat to my next concern on parking. And
Before you do though,
Certainly.
can I bring up one more point? In most municipalities, and we would have to dig into this, we can receive occupancy on buildings, partial occupancy. And so one of the advantages of the change we've made to this building is the way that this parking would be built is incredibly faster than our last proposal. And if David's schedule holds true, we can't guarantee it tonight, but it is entirely possible that if it starts in fall, that the public parking could be operational by the following summer. That is, it could come online before the rest of the building. So it's a distinct possibility. We've done it in other places. We would have to do a little more digging. And as David mentioned, it's a conversation with the construction manager once we have one on board, and we can make it clear to them that that is a priority. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up because I honestly don't know how the occupancy on our end of that works.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's something that's realistic and feasible, then that may be something where we need to find out if that's if that exists in our codes, and if not, how can we make that work? If it's not realistic and feasible, there's no point in going through that exercise. But
unless there's extraordinary circumstances, it will be governed by the building code, which we can dig into a little bit. So,
so touching back on the second parking concern, village resident very aptly brought up, how long is the public parking going to be there? How long is the public parking going to be free? Not to put you guys in the hot seat from a incentive perspective or a return on investment perspective, but for the trustees to consider, along with, I believe, Council Wolf, possibly building in some kind of easement with a right of first refusal should any then owner wish to eradicate the free public parking aspect of the 102 spaces, such that the village would be able to purchase said 102 spaces to keep that free for the residents. Something to consider on the trustee level.
I think that would be in the development agreement that it would be the village's in perpetuity, I would assume.
I think I'm no legal expert on ownership and that, but my belief is that the redevelopment agreement will provide that the village in some form, whether it's condo or other type of format, will own it in perpetuity. It will be separate ownership. Marquette Companies has done a similar project actually in Naperville. Their waterfront development, my understanding there is that public parking lot they built as part of the mixed-use development is actually owned by the community.
Yeah,
so you'll have protections in ownership, is what I'm saying.
I've been involved in projects that work very much the same way, where it's
so our biggest concern will be in the future is memorializing. How do we make sure that that's taken care of at the highest level, right? Since you'll own it, it'll be part of our building. We just will have some kind of agreement in terms of maintenance and ongoing maintenance to make sure it's Class A operation, right?
Go ahead.
As you know, a great role of this, a great portion of the role of staff is to protect the village's interests. And if you looked at the plat of subdivision, it has, there's a recommendation that would be approved subject to any final language changes from the village attorney. But I want to point out that there is a notation that there will be a covenant. So declaration of operating covenants, because there is that element of cooperation and coordination between the village and the building owner. And then also there is on there that they will not object to an SSA should it need to be placed. It's a backup SSA where funds ever needed to be put in place to maintain any elements of the building. So I just want to point out that the language is on the subdivision plat. Okay.
And so I think this is not a question for the developer so much, but the broader question is, how does the community hold the political elected officials feet to the fire on there not being a charge to park there? Because that's ultimately going to be a decision that the village makes, not the property owner or any future property owner. But I do understand that concern. So this is kind of a question for staff and a question for the developer rolled into one. It's my understanding that the 8-foot sidewalk around the north and west side of the project represents the tri-trail. And my immediate concern with that would be, so this is a little bit question, a little bit comment as well, how we're treating the garage entrances, both vehicular and pedestrian, because that's visualized as a bicycle trail. There's nothing shown on any plans, but I want to ensure that those kind of safety enhancements are in place.
They're standard elements that we use, right? For the concern is here with the bike trail on this corner,
Sure.
and the security measures to warn pedestrians or bikers that there's traffic coming in and out of there.
So if we look carefully at the the west elevation, which is on the bottom, in many developments we would have two overhead doors, one which goes into the at-grade parking and one of which goes into the basement parking. We're showing 4 because experience has taught us that if one of those doors breaks down, then no one can get in or out. So, but elements that we can use that we've seen are, we can have mirrors adjacent to the doors. We can make the doors open very slowly, which the residents won't love, but it is a calming situation. And then the other thing is we can have pressure plates and sort of flashing lights. I'm sure you've all seen these. There'll be a flashing light when the door is opening, so that a pedestrian or a cyclist coming by will know that a car is coming in, or they'll see them going in, obviously, but that a car may be coming out. So there's a number of industry sort of stock devices that we can employ to make that safe.
So I guess as a cyclist myself, I think my concerns are less, I kind of have issues with that as a trail at that location. I know this isn't the conversation for that maybe, but it's all happening at once. Like that, you've kind of got the 90-degree turn. If you could bring up the site plan, yeah, that'd be great. Like the direction that the man doors for the lobbies and all that open, that's critical.
Yeah, that location was mandated, sorry. The location of the tri-trail connector was dictated by IDOT. They were very specific. They wanted the crossing of Villa Avenue to be at Wildwood.
Are there things like, I understand, I perfectly understand why they want that crossing there, and I'm okay with the crossing there. I'm just wondering if there are ways we can improve the experience for anybody who, I mean, I don't know how many cyclists are going to use it. I wouldn't. I'd be on the road or on the prairie path, I'm being honest.
Well, I mean, it's a connector to the Salt Creek Trail,
Right.
so
But even then, I would take the prairie path to Monterey and go north.
Yeah.
So, but you're talking about potentially young kids, people accessing the rec center when the rec center is open, and I just wonder if we can do better on designing what's happening here, so you don't have two cyclists passing on an 8-foot sidewalk, literally against the wall of the building. I don't know if there's a.
I'm not sure.
This is a high level thought, right? I'm having right now.
I'm not sure if we were aware of this development when Tri-Trail was in the early stages of the design. So we certainly can bring it up to their attention that that's how it's going to look now with the rec center and the union. Maybe they will be open to some sort of a rethinking and,
Yeah, because they're.
changes.
I mean, it. To my mind, it's like almost at this point, the Tri-Trail wants to cross. It'd be adjacent to the rec center. Now, once you get east of Villa, you have more driveways, so I understand why you'd want it on the south side of Wildwood, east of Villa, but. That's not necessarily for this developer to solve, but they're going to be involved in that process.
Yes.
So this is my thought.
And the path itself, that's not something this developer will be constructing.
Right.
So it will be built with IDOT funding.
No, that being said, I will say, because we have the bicycle storage and we expect our tenants to use that trail to the south, we want the same kind of safety features that you do, so our interests are aligned.
But you kind of understand what I'm saying,
Yeah,
right? If you have a cyclist going north on the west side of your building and a cyclist going west on the north side of your building, and then there's a 90-degree turn right there, as a kid's running across Wildwood to get to the ice cream place
It's going to look
from
like,
the rec
it's
center.
gonna look like the Tour de France last year. Yeah, right, when they all crashed.
We
Politics.
don't
Yeah.
want that. We don't want that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And along with that, I would say, when we as a village are thinking about that, maybe think about the way, if there's a sidewalk connection at this corner, or if it's a crosswalk or whatever, to the rec center across the street to the north. Again, that's not on the applicant, but it's all going to be part of the same stuff getting torn up at the same time. I do like, I like the 4 garage doors, actually. They're shown here with glass, correct? Is that what I was seeing on the elevations?
Correct. We usually like to do these on street frontages as a frosted glass door.
Yeah, I like that a lot. The 4 doors kind of breaks up the elevation a little bit. The glass, even if it's not transparent, is going to read better than a solid dark gray metal door or whatever you would typically see.
Well, that, and also they'll glow at night because the parking is required to be lit. So-
Right. And
So
then
they'll be more visible.
I like that even though it's not necessarily a public use, I like that you do have your amenities in that northwest corner that activates that corner. And I mean, you could see it. I mean, you probably have already thought of it. Tenants coming down that elevator, walking to the rec center across the street, especially if there's. So I like that corner and that side is not completely turning its back on the neighborhood behind it, which would be pretty easy to do. I know you've got to have your louvers, and I'll give you that. Question I had about the south facade.
I'm going to try to do historic inserts on those.
So on the south elevation, you're showing open there. Is that open, or is that with similar material as proposed on the north side?
Right now, it's shown as open. from a building code perspective, there's a certain percentage of opening you need to qualify as an open air garage. And I'm, in complete honesty, we haven't finished those calculations yet. So if we do pursue the perforated metal on Wildwood, that will decrease the percentage of opening. Because when you buy these panels, you can say, I want the panel that's 50% open. I want the panel that's 30% open, 70, whatever. So right now, we're being conservative on the south side of the building and suggesting that these are entirely open just to make sure that we don't have to ventilate this garage mechanically. So that is still a little bit in flux.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess to the degree possible, you guys would want something for security there, but also maybe some sort of design element. I don't know exactly what that is, but...
You know, we don't know the budget yet, but I think I presented to you at the last hearing that our hopes would be that at least on that side, and some of those, we could have some customized inserts that would reflect historic elements related to Villa Park, some of which we've talked about as we discuss the architecture. So we're going to be looking into that. Could we, not necessarily on all of them, but on some of them, have customized inserts versus those panels you saw today, and again have sort of references to historic elements of the village.
Okay. And similarly, I know you've taken steps to try to enhance the pedestrian entrances to the garages, and I know you're kind of limited because there's not a lot of space in the garage and you can't have a wide lobby and that, but whatever you can do on the exterior in terms of lighting, canopy, I mean, obviously not something obnoxious, but I don't think that's a problem because I like what I've seen from the design, the materials. I'm honestly impressed by the materials. I can't tell you how happy I am that you're doing a basement. I was okay with the 7 stories, but I'm more okay with the 6 stories. The step back for the public space, I guess the private open space on the roofs of the first floor, that's not going to feel as much of a wall as it could have when you originally...
Go back out.
Yeah. And just kind of by way of knowledge, one thing that I looked into, so you're proposing this at about 75 feet. That center, the parapet at the center of the old Ovaltine building is about 65 feet. And then the 2 stair towers are about 75 and 85 feet, I think I figured. So while you're taller, at 75 feet, you're not as significantly as it was at 85 feet. Let's see, questions. Any other questions before we move into comments and discussion up here and give them any final? We may have questions during comments. That tends to happen in the discussion. Anything right now? No. Okay. You guys have any closing comments, or are you good? Good? Okay, thank you. All right, so we will close the public hearing, move to discussion by commission members. If you, actually, this is all part of the same one. So yeah, that's just the way so keep this rolling. This is all part of the same hearing. Thanks. Yep. Does anybody need a quick break, or are we good to keep going through this one? Okay.
Keep going through this.
Yeah. All right.
And none of these mics are working?
They work, but they might not work in here. Do they? Okay.
So a little louder would help, I'm struggling.
Okay.
Because there's, background.
Yeah, understood. All right. Discussion by commission members. Thoughts, questions, comments generally at this point? One thing that I do know from talking to staff is that they want us to add a condition that the final landscape plan would be, final landscaping would be based on a plan approved by staff, that this is not the final landscape plan, that there are some details that need to be worked out in terms of landscaping, and if we're gonna have a motion tonight to vote on this, that alone shouldn't be enough to hold up the process, if that's how we move with it. So,
With regards to that, condition number 1 on page 11 of the packet. I'll let everybody get there.
yes.
So the last line of condition 1 that begins landscape plan dated May 4th, 22. Staff is asking that that be revised to landscape plan TBD with staff. Oh, the final landscape plan.
Yeah, so it would substantially conform, but the final still to be, the final landscape plan still to be determined through our discussions with the redevelopment agreement and other factors, so I wanted to leave room for it to change.
So you're saying currently as written, condition number 5 is inadequate or is fine as written?
I think I misunderstood you earlier, that you've got the condition in there the way you want it.
It's already in there, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. I get your point though, Justin, that it's dated, but things are going to change anyways. I think that condition number 1 in substantial compliance with the plans is still okay to be in there, but we're just pointing out that, you know, the streetscape, the landscape, the photometrics still may change as things firm up.
So just
And I will say, as our process exists, staff has that type of administrative approval moving forward, but I was just putting it out there.
I need you to keep down in the back, please. I bet we've got a court reporter who's trying to take everything down. Sorry. Thank you.
So staff does not feel that conditions 1 and 5 contradict one another? Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Ellen? And I'm sorry, I don't remember, but from Villa Avenue going westward, are the utility lines above ground there?
The electric is going to have to be addressed. There are above-ground poles. It
Okay.
appears that at least one pole will need to be relocated, and there's a sanitary line to be relocated as well, and we've talked about that internally.
Okay. Would those lines then be placed underground?
It's the village's preference that they are, yes.
Okay.
David Lyon with Catalyst Partners. Yeah, our plan is fully to bury the overhead lines. We presented this before in the last public hearing. So there are 2 power lines, one running east-west on the southern border of the site and one on the north. And our plan is to bury both.
One north what?
There are 2 power lines.
I got that, west.
They both run east-west, one on the north of the site and one on the southern portion of the site. And our plan in construction is to bury both of those lines, both at the north and the south.
I have one, I guess you'd say, comment that I have for, I guess you'd say it's for staff, with going forward, looking at the project is if this moves forward, if we can get any of the issues, I know it's not the developer's issue, it's the village's issue, to take care of or look at or put something in writing on fixing the flooding issue, over in the park. And the reason that I say that, if we're gonna enhance the north end of the bike path, then why wouldn't we wanna make sure that the south end of the bike path, or south side of the bike path, and if the village, if some of this property is owned by the village, we're gonna gain some revenue for the property, and I think that we should be able to try to look at fixing some of the flooding issues that are over there.
Yeah, I concur, Mike. In the packet, there is a line item. Granted, it's not a mandate, it's not a condition for the project, but I think you and I talked about this a little bit earlier. There is a line item that says, or line in there that says the project will contribute a fee in lieu of roughly $53,000 to the village.
I can't hear what you're saying.
The project,
There's a line that says
the project will contribute a fee in lieu of roughly $53,000 to the village, which will be used for stormwater improvement needs. $53,000 to the village.
I got that, which we use for stormwater and.
Improvement needs. And it is my hope that the village will hold itself to that goal of utilizing that fee in lieu income for said stormwater improvements in that direct area.
So the fee in lieu of, the fee in lieu is actually, the money goes to a dedicated stormwater fund, and those money, they only use to specific stormwater improvement projects throughout the village, not necessarily in this particular area. So that's one. Number two, certainly we can look into the existing flooding issues by Pioneer Feed and Cortese Park. It is clearly a sewer capacity issue. It's just too small. Could we upsize it? Obviously we can, but any storm sewer will have certain capacity. So we looked a little bit into the overflow outlet from that low line area by the corner. It could work. I don't know. We're gonna have to take a look and see what can be done, I guess, to improve the situation.
I want to point out that this area, there is a rise on the path, and this area does not contribute to the flooding south of the path. It flows in a different direction. Water from this general area leaves in like 3 different directions, and the village considered where the best place was, and it is on the east side going into the villa system, correct?
No, I understand. I guess you'd say what I'm kind of looking for is, if we're gonna make a huge improvement, if you want to call it an improvement, a structure, a building, to that area, that we enhance the other areas around it also, if we already know that there's issues, so that it doesn't impact in a negative way.
Well, an example of how that might happen is that this is outside of our realm, but there's been discussion of creating a new TIF there, because I believe the TIF that's currently there is about set to expire, if it hasn't already. 10 years left? Okay. So, but there is the TIF there, and this is going to contribute significantly to that TIF district, in terms of what it does to the property values. I mean, just on the site alone, whatever it does to the adjacent properties.
Right.
And those are funds that theoretically could be used for improvements in the area. So.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to put on the record, Patrick's here, our Economic Development Director, but that is the whole purpose of tax increment finance, that you have a base level of valuation of all the properties in the district, you develop it, that valuation and property taxes rise, that money is used back in that district. That's how TIFs work in Illinois.
And
just for the record.
Yeah, the TIF, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the Ovaltine TIF went from, that area went from, was like $800,000 in assessed value to millions now. And that difference, that increment, goes into the fund that can be used within that TIF. This project would have the same impact, probably more so, potentially.
I guess I'd just like to make sure we get it done.
Yeah, I think everybody up here agrees with you, Mike. That I think is true. On the project as a whole, I'm really excited about it. I know staff has worked tirelessly on it. I know the developer has worked hard on it. They've one thing I do want to commend them on, whatever ultimately happens with this project, is the outreach. Because there are developers who do the outreach after there's a backlash instead of doing the outreach first. So that's appreciated. This project could be coming to us and the community for the first time tonight. And if you've ever done one of these before, and I know you have, that doesn't usually work out. It usually turns a 4-month process into a 1.5-year process that fails. So other comments up here on the project or discussion?
I like the project. I like that you did switch the parking. I think that makes it a lot smoother.
I think it's kind of a secondary point that the MX2 zoning here actually makes considerably more sense than the MXR2 or the MXT. And one thing that was called out in our staff report that I think is very relevant, that wasn't really mentioned. I mean, I think Ellen mentioned it briefly, but within the MX2 district, and actually I think all of the MX districts except for maybe the MXRs and the MXT, the second, so there's a 4-story limit in the MX2, but they can add 2 stories through the special use process, which is a considerably lower bar than a variation. And I think that's probably the most substantial issue here. And the MX2 zoning actually kind of envisions the potential for that type of development with strict scrutiny, which I think this project has certainly had.
Well, there was one thing that I was going to comment on.
Okay.
And that was the parking and whether it's free or a fee. I know with some of our prior meetings, we've actually discussed parking in the village as a whole, as far as free or a fee. Because at some point, yes, you got to do maintenance, or you have to supply parking, and you've got to have a fund to get that money from. Otherwise, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So if it transitions to where it's going to be a pay to park, that's something that's already been discussed. I know in our commission in the past, I don't know, three months. So it's just something, because the village is lacking parking in all of the business districts. And how do you acquire more parking if you're not acquiring any funds to do it with? So just for the record, as far as people that are watching the meeting or are going to watch the meeting, it's not necessarily anything to do with the petitioner here tonight, but stuff that we've talked about in the past already.
Ellen, could you maybe talk briefly about the concept of an SSA and what that might mean in the scope of a project like this?
We haven't talked about that in any great detail. An SSA, though, is a special service area, and it's an overlay with an additional property tax, so it is tax deductible, just like your property taxes are. And it is used to fund services that are being provided in the geographic area in which it's being collected. And it's a common backup plan for new subdivisions, for example, something which Villa Park hasn't seen in many years. But when you've got common area elements like detention ponds or landscaping entryways, you set the list of agreed upon elements that you would fund through the SSA, and then it gets applied. This being a rental property, you're only going to have 2 landlords in the building. You're going to have the Marquette Catalyst Group or their successor group, and you're going to have the village if we end up owning the parking. I don't know if what the final arrangement of ownership will be. That'll all be determined through the redevelopment agreement. But it's a mechanism for a municipality to have funds to maintain agreed upon elements.
Yeah, that's not necessarily something that would happen here, but it is a potential tool.
And Ellen, I would like to thank you for calling out the text that is on the back of the final plat of subdivision that we do have. I do see where you point out that it says, except as to be provided by the declaration or layman's terms, the CCRs. I didn't have that in front of me, as in the text of the deck or what that looks like. So that was my question as to the mechanism or the options that we, as the village, may have on ownership rights of said 102 parking spaces.
All right. There's anybody else?
Yeah, I have one. I have a few comments. I have no issues with the project whatsoever. I'm really excited for the as a lot of the consensus up here on the dais is. As far as how the building sort of interacts with the street level landscaping, Ellen, you speak to that, where all of those fine details are going to start to be hammered out, and I think that's where how the building engages with the street and the sidewalks and such like that, and I'm looking forward to seeing those further details as this project continues to develop. Obviously, corners are the critical sort of spots where that is, and you've obviously already been addressing all of those as we sort of discussed. I think there's one other element that I see as a potential opportunity to add a little extra in terms of its public face. If Cortese Park is the park that we know and love it to be, and its activities that go on there, the two, the middle and the western tower sort of flank that sort of vista as we look north, and I think those could be some possible, I don't know, something to have other than just the stair tower, right? I mean, is there something else that we could sort of add on to those things? I think it could be an interesting opportunity to be a marker. I'd love to, but I could see those being prime opportunities for something to that effect.
I'll just jump over there very quickly. So there are some areas of blank wall, right? And that is because there are 2 fire stairs there. The westernmost one, because the property line angles, is actually on the property line, and as such has to be, well, all of our exterior walls have to carry a fire rating.
Right.
The western stair is not allowed to have any openings just due to the fact that it's right on the property line. The center stair we could work on that a little bit. And to David's earlier point, that could also be an opportunity for some very visible artwork.
Right.
So we could definitely look into that.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
Or a clock.
Some rustic painting. I don't know.
No. I mean,
we'll pick
at
one.
least 3 of them, right? We work in 3s.
Projection screen.
Yeah.
Eric wants a sundial.
Yeah. If we ever get sun, that'd be great. Yeah, right.
What do I got, Eric?
That's all I got. Yeah.
Okay. You good? Anything else down here?
I just appreciate the call out for the preservation of the Monarch garden beds. The village residents take pride in having those there. I understand the portion of the area that will revert to DuPage County will also encompass that. So anything that village staff can do with the permitting process to protect those beds or find alternative arrangements to replant those later would be appreciated.
Ellen, bike racks would fall into landscaping probably, correct? Bike racks? Landscaping and street furniture?
Street furniture, yes.
Um,
I think there's some opportunities along the south facade.
That's what I'm
Still
thinking.
for landscaping and bike racks. And people are just, they're going to see this building as they come across the path and be drawn to it, so.
Yeah, and especially if you get a restaurant user or something in there, I think that would be a missed opportunity if you didn't. And I'm not talking hundreds of bike racks but some hitching posts at your saloon would be nice. So I'm going to mention that to staff.
Vasily reminds me that there are some triangular pieces that are still part of this parcel of land, but the remainder is DuPage County. But there are some triangular notches that could be landscaped, and anything on the path would, of course, have to be approved by DuPage County. You just can't say, oh, we're going to draw a whole line of green, because it's not all their property.
Right. To the extent that we could get to something like that, that would be great. Otherwise, it's a missed opportunity. All right, if there's no other comments or discussion, I would entertain a motion with all of the conditions and so on that's in here, whoever wants to take on that Herculean task. And I will make sure that the court reporter gets a copy of the memo so that
Yeah,
she
I'll read the proposal verbatim. It'll be, for Gloria, for you, it'll be from pages 10 through 12 on the packet.
Okay, do I have that? 'Cause I
That-
can't hear you very well. You're gonna read something, is that this?
No,
No.
I have a copy.
we'll make sure you get a copy.
Okay.
But I'll speak louder for you. Okay, I will make a motion to approve PZ-22-0001 for the following requests. 1. Zoning map to change zoning from MXR2 and MXT to MX2 PUD for the block bounded by Myrtle Avenue, Wildwood Avenue, Villa Avenue, and the Great Western Trail. 2. Special use for a planned unit development consisting of a new 6-story mixed-use building with approximately 220 residential units, residential amenity space, 8,000 square feet of commercial, and approximately 425 parking spaces, and consisting of the following code exceptions to the MX2 building type regulations found in section 4.4 MX districts. A rear yard setback of 0 feet where 5 feet is required. A 6-story mixed-use building where overall maximum of 4 stories are permitted. Approximately 85% maximum impervious cover. Garage entry on the side yard for public parking and rear yard for resident parking, where only rear yard entrance is permitted. Streetscape area from 0 feet to 10 feet, where a minimum 13 feet streetscape area is required along street frontages. Blank wall limitations. Reduction of the minimum amount of transparency on facades of the lowest level. A reduction of streetscape elements, including the requirement for on-street parking on the south side of Wildwood at the request of the village in order to accommodate bike path needs. Driveway entrances across the public right-of-way greater than the 25 feet permitted. 3. Approval of the final plat of subdivision of the Union, subject to any changes approved by the village attorney, with the following conditions. 1. The development shall be in substantial compliance with the plan prepared by Korb and Associates, dated May 4th, 2022, including a PUD site plan dated April 29th, 2022, architectural site plan dated May 4th, 2022, the building elevations dated May 4th, 2022, landscape plan dated May 4th, 2022, and parking plan and public parking plan dated May 4th, 2022. 2. The development shall be in substantial compliance with the engineering plans, PUD site plan, and paving and layout plan prepared by V3 dated April 29th, 2022. 3. Compliance with all applicable village codes and regulations. 4. Obtaining all necessary permits and certifications for development, including a building permit, right-of-way permit, and a stormwater certification. 5. Final landscape and photometric plans subject to the final approval by the Community Development Director. 6. Security systems are subject to review and approval by Villa Park Police Department and will include Village of Villa Park access to the closed circuit security, abbreviated CCTV, system in the common areas of the complex. The system should include cameras in the public areas of the complex and an exterior flock camera along Villa Avenue. 7. Final PUD site plan will include a lighting plan for the interior common areas, e.g. lobby, elevators, doors, parking areas, with directional lighting installed in the darker areas of the complex as determined to be needed. For the property located at 100 through 110 South Villa, pins 06-10-106-001, 06-10-106-002, 06-10-106-004, and a portion of Myrtle Avenue which will be vacated, with a finding of fact that such special uses meets the standards enumerated in Article 11.2 and 11.4 of Appendix C of the Municipal Code of Villa Park Basic Zoning Ordinance.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
I have a second from Commissioner Orlowski. Any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, roll call vote. Calvert.
Yes.
Hofstra.
Yes.
Ludke.
Yes.
Orlowski.
Yes.
Schlinsky.
Yes.
I too vote yes. With that, our recommendation passes to the village board. They can accept, reject, or modify. Good luck moving forward. Thank you. Quick break.
You fine with that?
We'll recess for 10 minutes. Another one that's the beginning and the end. So that's fine if that's how it ends up. This is a different petition. I said, yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Okay, so what do you mean beginning and end?
So,
What I'm doing is 3 different transcripts. The one is the minutes one, the second one is that one we just did, and the third one is what we're gonna do now.
right, and then there might be a little at the end. You can just tack that onto the beginning. Like
The first transcript.
There might be one at the end, but I'm tack on, okay, just let me know
yeah,
where something goes.
yeah. So like other business, if there's anything there, which there may or may not be when we get down there, that would go with the stuff at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll try to keep this clean, but there might be some back and forth here, so. All right, everybody good? All right, so then we are back in session, and our next petition will be PZ 220004, Village Code Amendments to Zoning Ordinance Appendix C. And the village is the staff and the petitioner, so that makes that part easy. Whenever you're ready, Ellen.
Good evening. This is another round at our text amendment. This, I think, actually started in 2020 when you first considered temporary or outdoor storage containers. In the memo, I had indicated the 4 ordinances that I found where you have steadily been going through Consuelo's original memo. The Consuelo was my predecessor, so Consuelo Argulis's memo to the commission. And on some of the items in the agenda, I've got some definitive recommendations because there's things I was very clear that I felt we knew what you wanted. Things that you had even addressed in April of 21 with Consuelo. And then others, I think we still need to talk a little bit. And so I've given you some materials to help walk us through, and you can see how it looks in this town versus that town, and how should it look here. We did publish public notice for this public hearing on Wednesday, April 27th. And basically we published for consideration of changes to the accessory structures in all districts, several elements about parking, visibility triangles, measurements, definitions. And then I gave you Article 4, the MX districts in total, so that you can see the various Scrivener's errors that I want to correct. And then I've got one substantive change there that I'd like to discuss. And I'm going to go there first, I believe. So I'm going to skip around here real quick on my PowerPoint, since we've just talked about MX districts for the last hour. So as we look at Chapter 4, the Scrivener errors are obviously self-evident. There was misspellings, there were some lines that were missing, there were a few figures that weren't called out from the original document that was passed in 2018. The biggest question for me is the differentiation in the districts, and I realized that I had an error in my memo, so I'm going to ask you to bear with me on this. This would be the top of page 3. One of the Scrivener errors is the titles at the top of that table, and I carried the wrong set of districts through in my memo. So that's a given, that the top of the general building on the second table needs to apply to MXT, MXR1, and MXR2, similar to the first table in 443 on general buildings. The second thing I want to talk to you about is the differentiation of the districts themselves. Is MXT supposed to be a mixed-use building, or is it just supposed to allow a variety of mixes, where some of them may be office and some may be residential? when you go, can you look at your MX4 district that was the whole packet, the whole chapter was in your packet. And if you look at page 2, you'll see a description of each of the MX districts. MX1 is low-scale, mixed-use buildings in the train station. It's commercial. It's pedestrian-friendly retail and service uses on the ground story along primary streets. And upstairs, you can have residential or office. MX2, I'd previously noted to you, should just be MX2. There's no differentiation of an A and a B in the code. It was an unfinished thought. I don't know that we need it. Maybe in the future you can add it, but there's no differentiation. It again is pedestrian-friendly, retail, office, and service uses on the ground floor on primary streets. The MX3 is basically St. Charles Road, a good portion of it, and it's supposed to create a street wall of storefront facades within a commercial corridor with a wider variety of commercial uses on the ground floor. And you would get to what uses those are if you were to look at section 6 with the use table. We don't need to focus on that right now. MXT is intended to be a transition, and it says office and or residential buildings transitioning between your shopping nodes and your residential uses. So it's the bridge between the MX3s and the MXR1 and 2. MXR1 is all residential at the train station. MXR2 is all residential in other areas. So my question to you is that first floor in MXT, what do you want it to be? And I'm suggesting here that we change the ground story and basement definition in the code, with the MXT having to be a mix with no more than 50% residential on the first floor. Otherwise, it might as well just be an MXR district in my mind. And the MXR1 and MXR2, you could put office and residential if you wanted, or you could put, you could put, and it would be residential above. The difference there is that there's commercial service and a wider variety of commercial uses in the T, and the R would be office or residential only. And I'm open to any and all conversation and discussion, but I think the commission needs to really think about and confirm what you want that ground floor on these districts to look like. The first 3 districts are very clear what they're supposed to be. They're commercial, they're pedestrian-oriented buildings. And when you have all pedestrian, well, all residential on the first floor, it's not of any appeal to a pedestrian on the street.
Right, and I think, I know when we were discussing the hearing for 27 West Park, I don't want to get too much into that project because it's not before us, but we discussed the interpretation of the language that was in there. It wasn't completely clear. There could have been a comma or not. But the fact that reading it within the district wasn't clear, that kind of led to discussion is what do those districts want to be? And I think one of the things that we need to think about is where are those districts? And so the 27 West Park, that is one, but there's MXT in the Villa Avenue area, but it's also the zoning designation at a number of the nodes along St. Charles. So the MX3 is most of St. Charles, but the intersections are usually MXT. And that, to me, personally leads me towards...
The main intersections are the MX3, and then so like Ardmore and Addison and towards Villa.
Yeah, I think like around...
But the ones in between are the T.
Right. I guess I say nodes. They were these kind of the transitional nodes in like mid-block.
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
Between the main streets. And as the code currently stands, and could be interpreted, those could have 100% residential on the ground floor.
I flipped this. This was me flipping the phrase, just so you know. So if you want
Right.
how it's written, look in your handout.
Yeah, so this would be require a minimum of 50% of something that's not residential. Personally, I like that because the residential on the ground floor, especially in some of the areas where you have MXT, if it was all residential, like all residential on the ground floor kind of works at the west end of Park. Does that work on a corner on St. Charles though? All residential on the ground floor? I don't think so personally. My opinion would be that there's a couple of ways to do it. This would be one way to codify a percentage of it that can't be residential without a variation. Another way that it's done in some communities is that in certain zoning districts, residential uses on the ground floor require a special use. So to put any residential use on the ground floor, you have to go through a review process before us and get approval by the village board. That adds steps, but if you think that it's the equivalent of like a gas station next to a residential neighborhood is a special use because there's a conflict. Residential on the ground floor in a commercial district also presents its own type of conflict. Because if you fill up residential, then you're squeezing out commercial uses, especially if the rents, if the rates flip where there's a little more value in residential or there's no market for, you see it in the city. Neighborhoods that used to be commercial now have units stuck in the ground floor conversions because there's no market for the commercial. It's not always done well, and it wasn't what the buildings were intended for. So I'm in favor of something, personally in favor of something that gets us to the transition having a mixed use.
And if I may, we all are a product of where we've come from and what we're used to. And I've worked in communities where it was first floor only retail. So that's where my mind wanted to take the MXT, and I'm asking you if I was right in that assumption. As for the R1 and the R2, I'm still not sure that's written the right way. So I would throw that back to you as a second question for the commission as a whole to determine. How do you want the first floors of those two districts to be?
Okay, so then I guess the first question is, what are others' thoughts? I just made my thoughts clear, but what other people think about these MXT districts? Do you need to think about it more? Whether they should be a mix?
So I'm taking a look at the Villa Park zoning map. I think that's a very helpful resource as we go through this conversation.
Yes.
I concur with Mr. Chairman that the MXT districts, as labeled such, that directly abut St. Charles, should remain as written. I think I'm good with that. I would like some clarity, and clarity meaning historical clarity, on the MXT districts that are so labeled as such on Villa Avenue, and why the decision was made to put those as MXT as opposed to a different zoning type.
Before you answer, you said MXT on St. Charles remain as written, remain as I wrote up there, or as the code is currently written?
I believe as the code is currently written, which would disallow anything greater than 50% of the first floor to be residential.
The way the code currently stands, the ground floor could be entirely residential.
Ground floor would be what?
Entirely residential.
MXT currently allows the first floor to be residential?
There's the code is not completely clear. There's a missing comma. The intent as written by the writer, who we've reached out to, was that there would not be, that you could have residential on the entire ground floor. It doesn't really read that way. But this is trying to clarify the code both in terms of interpretation and intent.
Okay.
So the intent of the change would be to get to something where residential or any single use other than commercial service, eating and drinking establishments, and retail sales. So it couldn't be more than 50% office. It couldn't be more than 50%. I'm trying to think of another use, but institutional use, I guess. But depends on it's the residential that's the sticking point, I think, though.
Yeah, directly off of St. Charles, I guess I'm less favorable of the residential aspect.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you're in agreement with what I'm saying and what
Yeah, that's what
Ellen
I
is
meant.
saying. Yes.
But I said I concur with
Yeah.
your interpretation on that. I apologize for any confusion on that. But getting back to my question on the historical aspect of it, what was the rationale or the reasoning on having the MXT districts as they're labeled as they go Villa Avenue south from St. Charles to Central?
So as I remember from the steering committee, the consultant who worked on that, like where to place the MX districts and how to do them, was juggling a laundry list of trying not to create a bunch of nonconformities while balancing reality and trying to get to something close to what the comprehensive plan at the time envisioned. But like looking at the site we looked at today, MX2 there makes just as much sense as MXT. More sense, really. And so I think there wasn't a lot of political will to create a whole bunch of upheaval on a zoning map beyond what we were already doing. And so some of those are being cleaned up now as we see where development is going. And so there may be changes like in that area where we should look at the map and think about whether that's the right zoning. That's possibly something we could do in in a goal setting meeting like we had discussed. Because there are places, but you have to remember, anytime you change the zoning, especially if you're changing the zoning on an individual property, then you have to notify that property owner, and they have an interest in it, which was not the case with the comprehensive plan update, comprehensive zoning ordinance update, because that's a village-wide notice. So then you get into a different set of issues when you start changing people's zoning. Some people won't care because you're giving them more property rights, but in some instances you could be taking away property rights. But we have to, those are things we would have to weigh carefully.
Yeah. So from the plan itself, I am not a fan of having residential in the ground floor in the currently labeled MXT districts on St. Charles and likewise on Villa Avenue. However, I don't really have an issue with any residential, or I don't have a problem with allowing residential on the ground floor of the MXT districts off of Central and Park between Princeton and Illinois. How I solidify that is then a question of, do we relabel? Do we rezone that particular area? If anybody else feels that that area should still have residential on the ground floor versus the areas on St. Charles and Villa. I just don't really see a lot of differentiation I do see a lot of differentiation, between the three little pockets of MXT districts on that southwest end versus those that are on St. Charles and Villa.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There are some MXTs that are different than others. In the MXR districts, I think we determined we have two of those. One south of Park and one adjacent to the train station. So those are not irrelevant because there could be more of them, but
Yeah, there's a little pocket of MXR2 in that same southwest area that I'm talking about. There's MXR2 similarly on or off of Villa Avenue between, was that Wildwood and Astor? There's different pockets. I mean, Ellen, do you mind if can I plug my laptop in to at least show the zoning map?
Yeah, I don't think I have the internet access here to pull it up. Do we, Patrick? Do you know?
Yeah.
Can we pull up the internet here?
Yeah.
Okay. The map might be helpful.
Maybe we should do this as our project for the year.
yeah. So what you're seeing here, most of the pockets that you're seeing there that are MX are.
These are MXR2,
Yes,
and then this little pocket down here.
right, and those are existing multifamily, multi-story, multifamily developments. Not all of them, but
Yeah, so
you've
what
got
I'm-
the Kenilworth townhomes off of Kenilworth.
Yeah.
You've got the site that we just rezoned today. You've got the two multi-unit apartment buildings south of Park. You've got the old Washington School, which is down there in the southeast corner. You've got the one over there behind 27 West Park over on the west.
Yeah, right there.
Actually, I think that's RM something else on the.
That's RM9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so those, and those make sense as having residential on the ground floor. I agree
I'm
with.
absolutely fine with any residential being here, because that's far away from the commercial areas. I don't really see a point to allow residential here or off of St. Charles here.
Let me make a comment. It's not just as simple as the district, because each district allows a different building type.
Yeah.
Right now, we're talking just about the general building type.
Correct.
So the project we just looked at tonight, while they changed it from the MXT to MX2, it wasn't so much the district, but it allowed them to build a storefront building which had 0 lot lines.
Right.
And they halved their required variances in half. They halved them from 14 down to about 7.
Right,
So-
and the storefront building type does not allow retail in the ground floor. I mean, residential in the ground floor, correct?
Correct.
It seems to me that what we need to do is figure out what that mix of use is in the ground floor at MXT, and then figure out if there are areas that are currently designated MXT that, or some other zoning designation that might need rezoning. I don't know. Eric's nodding his head over
I
here.
don't. So, sort of, going back to the sort of the text issue at hand. If we're dealing with MXT and we're talking about a general building, just because residential is permitted to be on the first floor by right as of now, that doesn't mean they have to put it in there. right? It's not something that's automatically needs to be provided.
In a general building?
Correct. It's a use that's allowed and permitted as of right if they wanted to.
Unless you're a storefront building and,
We're talking general
Yeah.
buildings, yes. Right, so it's not that we're saying that inherently, if you're gonna put a general building up, that it's going to be a residential use by default. Because then we look at the semantics of the text as it originally is written and what you're proposing, and I think there's, a placement of a comma or whatever it might be, but in the suggested recommendation in red on your packet on page 3, if I'm in a general building in T, an R1 or R2, we're saying that we can have all the permitted uses are limited to no more than 50% of the gross floor area of a story, except commercial, service, eating and drinking establishment, and retail sales. So the things that fall into that category of all permitted uses, except we're talking about the residential components, right? We're talking about the household living, one household per lot, 2 households, 3 or more households. Those are permitted. Okay, but when we say that, we're saying we can only put those in on 50% of lot. Now, on some of those spots on St. Charles Road, those lots could be deep. We could have retail in the front, and you could have some residential on the backside. That's not on St. Charles Road. I don't know how somebody's going to come and design a 200-foot deep lot that fronts on St. Charles. That's not going to be. That's going to be a weird retail sort of thing, right? That's a big store, or parking, right, or whatever it might be. But to give the flexibility to say, I don't know. Especially the ones that I think of the ones between Ardmore and Villa, right? That sort of residential block area there, that's sort of in place. To specifically call out and say in a general building, to say we don't want residential on that first floor, I think we're handcuffing ourselves, because we're going to inherently have petitioners come and say, boy, I'd like to get a couple units down there if I could, or whatever.
Well, I think the point is not to necessarily disallow residential entirely. It's to limit. I'm sorry. It's not, the intent's not to disallow residential entirely. It's to limit street facing residential. And that's why that's the 50%, right? But that doesn't stop somebody from putting 50% in the front, and it's a design thing, like you said. And that may be why something like, the reason I struggle with creating a special use process is just, it's a process. It's an extra set of steps that somebody has to go through that takes away from as of right development. But it's a pretty common thing in some types of zoning districts where you want a downtown feel for there to be a review process for ground floor residential uses, because while they may be well designed or whatever, they could still be a negative impact on a retail street.
So do we think that there's a possibility of amending the language in such a way that we're in those, specifically MXT, where we're, then.
I thought the description of the MXT district was weaker than the others on page 2 of MX4. Why don't we table this until next month? Because I think we've got a lot to go through, unless you think we want to hear from everybody?
Yeah, no, I guess generally, is there kind of consensus to the thought process that's been going on in that 100% residential on the ground floor and MXTs is probably not the best thing. But how do we get there? There's something we need to investigate.
So, with regards to the debate, or the comments rather, that were just shared about street facing versus non, is it merely just a compromise to just include that term in the proposed red line, such that it reads, all permitted uses are limited to no more than 50% of non-street facing gross floor area of the story, except commercial service, eating and drinking establishments, and retail sales?
I think that's a possible workable text addition to that.
Yeah, we
that
could
starts
also
to work our way towards what we're looking for.
we could also look at how that might relate to primary streets. I don't have the list of primary streets in front of us, but if all of our MXTs fall on primary streets, I don't know if that's the case, but if they do, that might be the workaround, that either residential uses are not permitted on primary streets without special use approval, or it could be that only a certain percentage could be. I mean, there's a number of ways you could get there, I think, but
Yeah. It's a lot to grapple with. The main reason, the main change for the union wasn't that the district changed, it's that the building type changed.
Well, the one thing that I'll comment back, if we go back to the steering committee, whenever we discuss some of this, in some of the districts, some of the discussion that we did have as a group is some of it you don't really know what kind of a home it's going to develop into as far as the district. So as far as, you know, who's going to come and look and what they're going to want to develop, because it's almost being its age, it's basically somewhat of a blank canvas as far as update. So you're not sure the time of season or what, as far as what they're going to bring it to.
And then personally, in I don't know if everybody else is in agreement or not, but in the MXR districts, I have no issue with those being entirely residential on the ground floor. I don't see how that would be problematic. Especially that we've got just a handful of them and they're in pretty much exclusively residential neighborhoods, right?
I think so, and I think they are all residential on the
Yeah.
first floor already.
And that's what, yeah, I'm okay with that, I think.
I'll go back and think about it and look at the zoning map and see if I can find a way also to portray to you where each district is, because that'll help the discussion, you know, the observation of which corners they're on. That's a really good one.
Yeah,
But-
and something to put on goal setting meeting that probably won't happen before Ellen leaves us would be looking over the zoning map for not just MXT, but other areas that might be cleaned up in that regard.
All right, I'm going to move on, if
Yep,
that's okay?
That's perfect.
All right. So this is what we published for. And in my memo, I went into the accessory structures next. I'm going to go into that next because Vasily's here. The
Bless you.
section on driveway widths, in my mind right now, I'm thinking, should I go to all the driveway stuff? Because you might be able to just say, yep, that's what we wanted.
Low hanging fruit.
Yeah, that's what I'm
I'm
thinking.
all in favor of
Sounds
that.
great.
Okay. So if you look at your memo, because I did not put these in the PowerPoint because it was low-hanging fruit. So if you go to page 8 of your memo, consideration of driveway widths, this is text that you previously discussed with Director Argulis, that the driveways would be at least 9 feet, and that's to correct a conflict elsewhere in the code. Yeah. And then we've widened the circle drives. Oh, wait, no, that's not circle drives, that's the next one. Do I need to go through these, or do you want to just go through them, Mr. Chairman? And you've seen these before, and you've agreed to this before, I believe, on each of these.
Yeah, I think we've seen most of these. So, in B, that's the driveways and street yards may not exceed the width of the garage. That's 22 to 24 feet. That's a small change. Nobody has an issue with that, right?
No.
Nope.
Circular driveways, we already went over each of those, the 12 feet in width. I don't remember what that changed from, but staff, 2 different staff members have concurred with that, so I think we're good with that. Evergreen shrubs
I
installed.
think it was 10.
That makes
So 10
sense.
to 12.
Evergreen shrubs installed and maintained along the length of the circular drive. I think we had unanimous consensus on that up here. And then in 7.8.7, B changes to the new definition of lot coverage, correct?
Right.
So that's a no-brainer. That has to happen.
I will point out, though, that we have to change the definition in Chapter 14, in the definitions, Article 14.
Correct. And then we get into parking area design. That's all engineering. I trust the engineers to know that stuff better than I do, so whatever they've suggested, I think we're in favor of.
Mm-hmm.
Looks up to...
The site triangle came up with the 24 East St. Charles, and what I'm doing there is adding in all of the MX districts, because unless your building is set back enough, you can't meet the triangle. And some of these districts are 0 to 10 feet, so.
Yeah, and I think that's something that if it's an as-of-right development during building review, permit review, if there's an issue, it's going to be raised, correct?
If you wanted, we could add something as determined, the determination of the site triangle, the question of a site triangle will be determined and reviewed by the Director of Public Works. We could add that type of sentence to give us the out and give staff the ability to do it, because we look at those things when we do site plan.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I think that's a good compromise, and that kind of works. It's along the same lines of what you've done further down the page that we're going to get to in a second in the abutting RS regarding fences.
Yeah, I'll add review and determination of site triangles by the Public Works Director.
Okay. And so then we have landscaping and screening.
I have a quick question about that site triangle.
Yeah, go ahead.
If memory serves, was the site triangle part of the conversation for the recent project on St. Charles Road next to the Walgreens?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Would that,
But for them, it
losing
did,
this requirement, would that have changed sort of the design? Do you anticipate that could have changed the sort of building design of the development design at that corner?
They could have come closer to the corner in
well,
that zoning.
I really fretted over it with them, and they sent me several diagrams to show how they couldn't meet it. And then, remember, that was like my first week here.
Yes,
and it realized it read on corner lots except MX3, so they didn't even need to do it.
Oh, it wasn't
that was
even an
MX3.
issue on there already. Perfect.
Yeah.
Got it.
It
Thank
was,
you.
but it might have been discussed in their presentation, so that's why you're remembering that.
Understood.
So
Thank you.
it came up on 27 West Park.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we have the landscaping and screening, where we're just adding a line that gives staff the ability to deal with conflicts between regarding fences where you have conflicts between zoning types, correct?
It's where you've got front yards to side yards, because you're turning a corner, or where you've got a non-residential district up against a residential district. So if you think of the library and the house to the north, or the church at 545 Ardmore, where again you had a house to the north, and one section of the code reads take it all the way to the lot line, and the other section says don't take it past the front of the house. So it changes. So we stopped both of those fences short so that when you're coming out of the driveway, you can see. You've got a bigger sight triangle, so.
Right, that makes sense to me. And then Article 14, we have just the insertion of language related to the impervious surface changes that we've already discussed. I don't think there's anything to discuss on those. Those were discussed last year.
I will point out we're going to have to look at the percentage of lot coverage on the M districts. You can see it originally, the code currently reads lot coverage is the ratio of the building to the lot, and we're changing this to say it's the ratio of all impervious surface. So that means the driveways, the patios, the decks, anything water can't percolate through. And so then you have a higher number, and that's what this commission has done already. You changed the residential districts from 30 up to 50 and 60% lot coverage, but we did not up the M districts, and so we're going to have to up those.
Well, do we need to look at that in the C districts as well?
Probably, yes.
Short answer, yes.
We should be good in the MX districts, I think, but because of the way the language is written there, but double check that as well.
They're already really high. They're at like 75%. So.
Yeah. And then the last is under words and terms beginning with F, fences. So we have decorative lattice is not intended to be used as a fence added to that definition. I assume there's no objections to that? All right, so consensus is all that's good.
Accessory structures?
I was gonna say now to the rest of the not low-hanging fruit.
Okay. So the first observation is that the code uses the term structure and building interchangeably. And Vasily and I did the bulk of this together with Danita Anderson, our code official, helping us. We recommend we just use the word structure. A lot of codes use just structure. If you want, we could do building and gazebo and shed as a building. I mean, garage, gazebo and shed as a building. But at the end of the day, it's still a mass on the property that affects the aesthetics, the lot coverage, and can create externalities next to the neighbor. And we have to confirm that fire and building code requirements are met. So, and that second bullet point there, is why we do zoning. We've got to have a legal nexus to health, safety, and general welfare of the population. So in considering these accessory structures, those were the factors that we weighed as our internal work team. So we talked a little bit about the fact that table 1319, is it? It's in your packet. Let's find it. Is unique from places I've seen it in other towns, in that we talk about permitted obstructions and encroachments not into the required setback, so that 6 feet from the side yard or the 30 feet from the front yard, while many towns said it as can it be in the yard or not. I gave you the Tinley Park example, and this was on your desk tonight in case you hadn't printed it out. And we really liked the way this one is written because it's very clear. It's permitted yes or no, and then you've got additional requirements, and we think we should add a column to our table when we're all said and done to clarify it. We think that reads really well. Also note that they talk about encroachments in the commercial zones and the industrial zones. We do not. Our code only talks about residential, and it's my suspicion we've just handled it all through PUDs. Think about bone roofing. We had an accessory structure in the PUD. We amended the PUD for a second accessory structure. But our code only talks about residential. Section 14.1.9, table 13.1, setbacks in R districts must be unobstructed. So I wanted to go through this, if you could pull this up, and let's just confirm that you think these elements should even be located in that yard. Vasily and I actually like the way it's written, where it can be in the yard, but we just are monitoring that it can't encroach into the setback. And I'll show you some examples why. Kind of bouncing around here. These are some real examples. This is what led us to this. This is the intersection of Illinois and Kenilworth. She had nowhere to place her deck because of how her driveway was. Now, she could have done a zoning request, you know, to put it on the side, but it's not hurting anyone. She's got a double lot. She's nowhere near encroaching into the required setback of the 30 feet off of Kenilworth. Here was another one that we'll talk about. It's not necessarily the placement, but what you see here is there's a garage. Where's my mouse? There's a garage here. This is one garage. It is in the, it meets the size requirements, so it is okay per code. And then open air gazebo was built totally adjacent to it. And Danita looked at it, and she looked through the building code, and the code only talks about separation from principal structure. This is up against an accessory structure. Right now, our code would have required it to be set back, and there's no technical reason for it to be set back. You know, if we wanted to, it would be an aesthetics reason. This one, based on the code, it was our right to approve the pool here. The gentleman had no rear yard. But again, he was out of the required side yard setback, so it worked. This one didn't. This was a special use that you guys approved previously, and it's in the front yard. But again, it was a call because there was nowhere for him to put that pool. So we're not talking about this type of situation. With what we're proposing here, this still would have had to have gone before you. That's what I wanted to point out. So back to, I thought we should review each one on this list, and first off, make sure you want it in that yard, because there's a few changes that I would suggest. I've already talked about how the code only requires, the code only considers residential properties, and there are some accessory structures that would be appropriate for industrial and commercial. If you want, we could come back and add that. I'll leave that direction for you to provide. This is the main section on residential accessory structures, and we referenced this in a past meeting. It's called structures, and then we talk about buildings all the way through. That's why I said it's interchangeable. And if you look at F, that needs some clarification because I put a slide on it somewhere. 30% of what? The cumulative total coverage of all accessory structures, including garages, shall be added to the footprint of the principal structure for determining the maximum lot coverage. So does this refer back to when 30% was our maximum for housing, or are we saying all accessory structures can only be 30%? It needs some clarification. I think it's a throwback to the 30% in the districts. It's just something else I caught looking through this. You've already talked about B and C above, that there's a desire to increase the accessory structures from 140 to 200, and you had thought 10 was too low. Some towns do 75% of the maximum height of the district. I think Geneva's 25 feet, you know, which is pretty high for an accessory structure, but when you get into a garage, We have a lot of garages in town that actually have second stories on it too, which is interesting. I think that might accommodate some of those. So I've talked already about the building and fire codes dictate the adjacent to the principal structures. So keep that in mind as we go forward, that are we talking about at the principal or against another accessory? Okay, so this is how we kept our thoughts straight as we went through it, Vasily and I. That we've got these garage sheds and gazebos that are more solid than the remainder. And they should all be, you can see what should be counted towards lot coverage. That was the first thing we looked at. We looked at whether it had a roof or not. We didn't care how much wall there was. It's just, is there a solid roof or not? Because then it gets covered, it gets counted towards lot coverage. So we wanted to simplify that thought from how you guys had discussed it before. Does that make sense?
Yes, vaguely, yes.
From the stormwater
Yeah,
perspective,
yeah, correct.
you know, is it percolating into the ground
Right.
or is it, okay. We've lost that much square footage to percolate into the ground if there's
Correct.
a solid roof. The distance to the principal structures, did I use the wrong table, Vasily? Yeah. I think I did. Oh, no. I'm gonna have to bring this back to you. The distance to principal they're all 5s and 0s based on the building code.
We don't differentiate between building and structure.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, I made a mistake in this PowerPoint. Let's keep going though. Our recommendation is this, that each lot would be able to have one freestanding garage. That's the current maximum square footage that we have in our districts, and then duplexes are 528 square feet. They could each have a shed. The 215 feet height is what you all had been considering last year. Again, the same for a gazebo. And then we didn't see any reason why there couldn't be any combination of other accessory structures as long as they could meet their lot coverage. And I've done that in other communities and never had a problem with it. So instead of just saying one accessory structure per lot going to 2, minimize the really bulky ones that could create the problem. There's also consideration though, a patio. If they're gonna have loud parties, you don't wanna be under someone's bedroom window. You know, so some things need to be placed based on what could be happening there, smoke, odors, noise. But this is what we would like you to consider.
Okay, just so looking at this, the one big change, if I'm understanding this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, this would theoretically allow an attached garage as well as a detached garage, which we don't currently allow. Is that accurate?
I was asking you about that. Oh, that's a good comment, because that's a question I was going to ask. You're right, that would be changed. If you don't want both, you would change it to say detached only if,
Okay.
you know, one or the other. But I think it's worthwhile to consider if you would allow, because people are wanting more stuff. And if it's an RS10 lot,
But do we want them putting more stuff in their backyards?
Right.
Well, it's all subject to a maximum lot.
Right. But there's a difference between
I had a
between a gazebo and a garage, right? I mean, it's aesthetics, but it's also volumetric and transparencies
So-
and
When we're talking about this one, and if we had an attached garage, could we then have an additional shed, like 2 sheds?
Well, we thought we would allow that or not, or maybe limit an accessory structure or a building to 2, for instance, per parcel, like Lombard code allows. But we deviated from that, and so right now we stand at where we will allow 1 shed and 1 gazebo with an enclosed gazebo, right? 1 shed per parcel and 1 gazebo and any number of accessory structures.
And the
that
gazebo
again?
would be one shed, one gazebo, and the gazebo would only count towards lot coverage if it was on a hard surface not already being counted, like a patio or
They
a
were
deck.
on a hard surface.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't just, you wouldn't double count. And gentlemen, I lost an entire slide. I apologize. I think I copied the wrong version onto the flash drive. So we're going to just have to work with what's in the memo a little bit too. So in the memo, I did ask you questions regarding whether or not you would be open to a second garage on those lots that could accommodate it. And that's a policy decision for you to make, but it's something that we're starting to get inquiries on.
Yeah, so I guess that's probably the big one to discuss, because that's sort of minor. That's more or less in line with what we discussed. I mean, there's some subtle differences that we could discuss, but an attached garage and a detached garage, sheds come with stuff. Garages come with cars and boats and RVs and motorcycles and driveways and grass that turns into driveways. I'm sure as anybody who's done code inspection has done code enforcement. That would be my concern with second garages. And I know people do that stuff even when it's not permitted. So that would be the concern I would have in terms of how we need to think about that. There's obviously a distinct difference in how a shed is used in a second two-car garage.
Well, some of what I mean, we got some lots that are, they're 460 deep.
Well, and I think they're talking about that when they talk
Right.
about allowing that for the RS10.
Right.
To be
So-
our larger lots in the village.
Yeah.
There is a benefit to it if people clean up their lots because everything's under a roof.
Right.
And they would have to meet their lot coverage, so you've got that limitation right away. It's a policy decision for you to ponder. We'll be bringing this back to you next month as well, and I'll have the correct table and all that.
Does it make a
too.
distinction between like two freestanding garages?
That I do not think we would permit, no.
Okay. I mean, I can see some of the older homes have a one-car garage, and maybe it is built into the house in such a way, and I'm thinking of some where you actually enter the garage and it's actually under the house.
Oh.
And it's a one car. You know, in situations like that, I wouldn't be opposed to a second garage, you know, a normal two-car garage to accommodate houses like that, but not two freestanding garages.
Yeah, so
Well, we didn't even think we should have two freestanding sheds.
Well,
That's
I would
just
agree with that,
too
too.
much clutter. And some towns do allow that. I think Lombard.
I think
did,
once
right?
you get into two sheds, there's other issues going on.
Yeah.
Lombard allows any two accessory structures per lot, not to exceed 200 square feet, and I believe 12 feet in height. The biggest issue we run into on a daily basis is, so the code currently allows 140-foot maximum square footage of the accessory structure, so, and only one accessory structure per lot. So if somebody has a shed already and he wants to, you know, people go to whatever, Costco and buy those kits, the gazebo.
Pergolas.
Pergolas, gazebo. They all exceed maximum square footage. They're, for instance, 12 by 14, that's it. We cannot allow that. And if you already have a shed and you want to install a gazebo on your existing patio, we cannot allow that. They have to go through a variance process. So this is kind of like the biggest issue we run into in the past few years.
yeah, and I think when we started the process, we were all comfortable with, you know, increasing to something that allowed, you know, a shed and a pergola or a gazebo and a pergola, and increasing that to 200 square feet. I mean, we approved that close to 2 years ago, I think. Year and a half, whatever it's been. That's one that I think everybody up here was in favor of. So I think the bigger question really is the detached, like second detached garage, because that is, we had one come before us for a variation on a deep lot, like one of the lots Mike was
That was
talking
on
about.
Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin, it was a deep lot with the house set way up front, and I don't remember if it had an attached garage or a small detached garage behind it.
Well,
But
That's
it was
206 South Wisconsin, right?
yes.
Yeah.
So that was approved because he constructed the detached garage. It's not a flag lot, but he owned a separate parcel behind somebody else.
Correct.
So it wasn't a separate parcel.
Yeah, and so that came before us as a variation, which we approved. And my question on the two garages, on lots that are big enough to do it, or in like this where you've got an odd shape, and that guy agreed to do some retention and he preserved some trees and things like that. But is that something that happens common enough that the variation process can't handle it?
Why don't we bring you a map with all the larger lots, so you can get a graphic feel for where it is. And as you drive through town, it's different to drive through town and admire the gardens and the homes. Look into their backyards. I am actually really interested by the number of cottage, carriage houses that I see, and I see garages with second stories, and we have such a wide variety, and a lot of these date back to I think the early days of the community. So let's just put that on the table and think about it. But do you agree with this part where it would be one freestanding garage if there is not an attached garage, one shed, one gazebo, and any other combination up to measuring their lot coverage?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think we already went through that. And pretty much, I don't think anybody disagreed with it.
The difference here, I think, is theoretically, if you're including the detached garage, you could wind up with 3 accessory structures, whereas I think we were limiting it to 2. But this is 3 very specific. So this isn't a freestanding garage and 2 sheds.
Well, if I may, you can't
Yeah,
really
please.
count the garage as it is an accessory structure, of course, but any residential property is required to provide
Correct.
parking in a garage, so you have to have one. So,
Yeah.
Incidental to the primary use. Yeah.
Looking at all of this and comparing that back to then section 14.1.8, which is the definition of lot coverage, I then think that we need to update that again because it currently reads with your red lines, lot coverage through impervious surface, including all principal and accessory buildings. And if we're going to change that to just say accessory structures, it's just a quick terminology change that we might need to take care of.
We would define impervious, we would define what's covered under there. You're saying that it's correct the way it's written, or no?
It currently uses the term accessory building, and if we're going to
Oh,
merge
yeah.
accessory building and structure together into one, we just need to clean up that language a little bit further.
Sure.
I was just looking at the definitions again as we go through this. Same thing with 14.2.13, but there you have accessory structures, so that works.
And again, on this one, there's always a little gray in the world, and the village engineer will have the final say on what's pervious or impervious, because people will come to us and they'll say, oh, it's impervious paver brick, but it's not, or it wasn't installed correctly. So they think that anything that's a paver brick is impervious, but it's not true. It's what's underneath it. So
Yeah, I'm okay with what's right there. I think that's the spirit of what we discussed, and I think it clarifies things. And I know we had some accessory buildings and accessory structures were used interchangeably, but I don't think they were ever intended to have separate uses. But I think at some point it kind of started to get interpreted that way, maybe, like there was a difference, if that makes sense. I think it was just used interchangeably by whoever was writing the code, and it might have been stuff that came from the old code and stuff that was written by the consultant after the fact. I'm not sure, but cleaning that up would make sense for sure.
On these topics, what do you think? Should we add that? We can add that notes table. We'll come back to that after we look at table 13.1. But do you want to add a section on what accessory structures are permitted in a residential district and what's in a non-residential? That's the Hanover Park handout you had.
Right.
And that was always handy to help administer the code. I gave you just the first 2 pages. I didn't put it in the PowerPoint. I apologize.
Is there not a notes? There's footnotes, right? Isn't that how ours
Yeah,
works?
those footnotes are, I'd rather just add another column than do the
Yeah.
footnotes and go back and
I'm in
forth.
favor of doing that if that,
Yeah.
that makes it more clear.
So we would be amending table 13.1.
Yeah, we'll add additional detail to it.
Can we change that to table 14-1?
Maybe that's why I can never find it, huh?
Exactly.
Yes, is the answer.
Yes. Short answer, yes.
And I don't see any reason not to amend the table or add a table. Probably easier to add a table for non-residential districts if you guys have thoughts on how that should work.
We'll come back with a recommendation on that. So can we look at table soon to be 14-1, previously known as 13?
Which one?
Look on page 6 of your memo, please. So I just had a few thoughts on it. For example, air conditioning condensers. I'm not sure that there would be a problem with them being in a corner side yard. I understand it's 2 front yards, but I can see a situation where someone might be better to put it there and not in the neighbor's bedroom on the interior. So some of these I think we might tag as a special use or some sort of administrative approval for it. And that's a nitpick. I don't know if you want to go that deep. Arbors are another one. Arbors, think of the days when you opened up the fence at the property line and there was a nice little arbor. And we're saying we can't have them in the front yard here. So that's one I think should change. Balconies, I think, could be a special use because there might be a time when they need to be in that corner side yard.
We do allow them in corner side yards. Or you mean interior side yard?
Oh my God. This gets back to, never mind, scratch that, please.
It's been a long 4 months.
It's been a long month, and I just, yeah, I'm catching up from being out, so. The carports, I'm not sure why we would, well, yes. Why wouldn't we allow them in an interior side yard? How often do we get carports? At all, to use them?
Unless they're an integral part of like a garage. They're not allowed.
We don't allow them as an integral part of the principal
Speak up a
structure?
little bit, Vasily. She's having trouble. I could tell.
I believe, and I may be wrong, but I believe we do not allow carports unless they are an integral part of the garage and built architecturally into the garage. So.
Okay, so then scratch that. No change to carports.
Yeah, because it says see section 610.4. That probably is the section that says no.
Correct.
They're allowed except they're not. Yeah.
And then some of these things need to change, like clotheslines and compost. That would refer more to, yes, it could be in the yard. You would never put that in the encroachment. You wouldn't be hanging your clothes 3 feet from the property line. So you see what I'm saying?
You want to see where they installed my clothesline?
No.
It's literally on the fence line. It runs from fence line to fence line.
Oh, then
At
that's
an
why
angle.
that is this way.
It's not there anymore, but the holes where they did it was.
You know, if it went perpendicular to the lot line, then it would encroach into the required setback.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Mine went at an angle, 45 across the back corner.
Did you want to lump gardens and the garden structures into one? Because vegetable gardens and a corner side yard aren't necessarily a bad thing. Downtown Geneva, they plant tomatoes on purpose downtown. People eat them as they walk through downtown.
I'm all for gardens.
The issue though with the way the way our table currently is, you either have street yard or non-street yard. So allowing it in the side yard, I guess you'd have to have a note.
That it would be, yeah, not front yard, but side yard
Right,
only.
'cause
And I don't know that anyone would miss them. I don't know that we need to change it. It's up to you.
South side of the yard.
Yeah, what if it is the south side, right?
yeah, and I see down here we're adding the private service walk. That was part of the
Correct.
change that we've talked about a dozen times, I think.
Okay. Do you see any changes in this? Why don't I just throw it back to you? Do you see any changes in this table where things should be permitted? And to help think through it, like for example, a deck, it reads no on the street yard, but that, the way the code is written, that would mean it can be in the yard itself, it just can't go into the front setback.
Into the setback, right.
Right.
Which, I mean, I think that's fine. Do we want a garden planted all the way to the sidewalk?
Correct, but what about a deck?
All the way to the sidewalk? No.
No. Well, and that's when you get into, some codes have a maximum percentage of the front yard can be accessory to protect that street view. So it's ones like the deck where I questioned if this was written correctly.
No, but Ellen, are you pointing out that the deck is also denied to encroach into the interior side yard?
Well,
Because currently it says no, meaning no encroachment into the interior side yard for a deck.
But does that mean it can be in the yard itself, as long as it doesn't encroach?
Sure.
I think it can.
Yeah.
that's how the code reads right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, that wasn't the intent, I'm pretty sure. But
It's useful.
it's very useful for the slides
That we showed,
We
the
showed.
examples we showed.
your typical 50-foot wide lot, you're not gonna have, your required side yard setback will be pretty much your side yard in most
6 feet and
in
it's
most
locked in.
cases.
Yeah.
So that's why this is useful. It helps us with the lots that don't, that where it can't go anywhere else. Because in most places it can't go anyways, because the lot is too narrow.
Yeah. None of these really jump out at me. I feel like arbors and trellises we talked about at some point. And I think I'd have to go back and look, but I think we modified this to allow attached in the front and interior side.
Yeah,
They
it
are.
differentiates between detached and attached.
Right, and I'm saying I think that was a fairly. I feel like there was a discussion about that a couple of years ago, and that separation was made because there were requests for attached trellises.
So if I wanted to put one at my service walk up to my house and we open my little gate on my fence, could I put one?
No, it's gonna be a detached in front yard, no. But we
Part of your fence.
certainly have a few in town, I can think of.
Yeah, I guess my thought would be like if there's some of these that are recurring problems or become recurring problems, we could change them. But, I mean, it really comes down to
Vasily and I will go through it again. We'll bring you more fleshed out recommendation next month.
the reality is how many people pull a permit to put up a trellis.
So I mean, I gotta take mine down?
That's what I have. I think we made a lot of progress coming towards consensus, and we still need to think about a few things, and then look at an actual red line with changes. And therefore, we would need a motion to continue this, date certain. So,
Is a
because
month
it's a
enough?
published hearing.
Is a month enough?
Probably not, given that I have to do 2 other cases, but we can bring it back. Why don't we do it to next month? Because we might need to check in with you.
That's true, and we can. And if there's nothing prepared, we can always continue it again.
One quick question on this, on page 7. Would hoop houses be permitted then, you're saying in a side yard?
I'm sorry, what house?
A hoop.
Hoop, H-O-O-P. The way it's written, it says yes.
And I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm defining a hoop house as being, you know, the semicircle, 6 foot high, plastic covered.
Right. A hoop house, that is a hoop house. You start your plants there early, you cover them. The way it's written here, you could not put one,
From street or
yeah.
Yeah, you could put one on an interior side yard or a rear yard, but not a corner or front yard. So you could theoretically, if you had the room within between the setback and your required setback and your structure, you could put one in an interior side yard.
Well, interior, you can actually, it can encroach into interior side yard.
Oh, right,
setback.
yeah, I'm confusing myself, yeah.
But the exterior side, this entire table actually mentions the encroachment into the required setback. So if your exterior side is 30 feet, for instance, your required setback is 15, so you still can.
Could go
there.
up to that
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
Between the structure and the required setback.
And that's where I think we can use this other column to say it's just not allowed in that yard at all, some of these things. I think that's how we get around and make it the hybrid table.
Okay. I think the notes table would help a lot, yeah. I would agree, the notes column.
So, Mr. Chairman, we would ask for a motion to continue to the June meeting.
Which would be June 9th.
Ninth.
So, is there a motion to continue PZ 220004 to a date certain of June 9th, 2022?
Is it 04 or 06?
04.
The text, it's 06.
Oh, is it 06?
04 was the Villa Perk that got
Okay.
withdrawn.
Oh, my,
And I did catch that, evidently not everywhere.
Yeah, it's on the
This
agenda.
is PZ 220006
Okay,
text amendments.
the agenda says 0004.
Yeah.
I apologize, I've
That's
been
okay.
moving fast.
All right, I'll make a motion to continue petition PZ-22-006 to a date certain of June 9th, 2022.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Have a second from Commissioner Orlowski. Questions or comments on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion, that agenda item is continued to the next meeting. All right, and this is when this would go in with the first part of the transcript. Everything from here on out. Okay, so, have any updates on any other items, Ellen?
Well, I found a few more than we had, of course, but there was the PUD timeframe and the administrative adjustment to take away the need to mail, and it simplified the process. And Consuelo had written those up already, but yeah, I just didn't get there. And we had talked last month about pushing those out as well, so.
Okay. And then the development on St. Charles that we issued variance for, that was approved by the board, correct?
Correct, as was bone roofing. And I
Nice.
think I told you, bone roofing came to me with the landscaping, and they had it all in the raised bed, and they did not want to put it in the grassed area, and there were a lot of conflicts there with utilities, and they felt sight lines, and they were doing a great job, so I modified it. I have the ability to do that. So when you drive by there and you don't see a bush in front of the parking space, that's why.
It looks nice.
Did they plant it already?
Some of it they did.
Okay.
Okay, who was it that came to you?
Bone roofing, 880 North Addison.
And what you're saying, Bold Murphy?
Bone.
Bone roofing, B-O-N-E roofing.
This is what I'm talking about that I need help with. I
Okay.
don't know who Bold Murphy is, so I'm gonna need some spelling. Anyway, okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion to adjourn?
Aye.
Second, on my right? All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Who was the first for?